Welcome to HP FanFiction. Support me by subscribing the channel. Also, like and share the video to keep me motivated to make more videos like these. They arrived in a clutter on the floor in the entry hall of Greengrass Estate. That is, Harry landed and immediately fell flat on his bum, while the Greengrasses and Sirius lightly touched down in a slight crouch. Cygnus looked at Harry with a grin, while Harry climbed to his feet, muttering, "I hate magical travel. Because of the spin, you need to touch down in the direction of the spin, and as if you're running forward," said Cygnus, "you landed backwards and almost stiff-legged. That's why you fell back onto your bum." "Just like flu travel, Harry," said Isabel. "You just need to practice." "I'll take the trunks upstairs," he said. "At least I can do that without looking like a twit." Using featherweight charms, Harry first placed one on top of the other before levitating both. While holding them both up, he grasped the handle of the bottom one and pulled it with him. He was so focused on what he was doing, he didn't see the looks of shock on either Cygnus's or Isabel's face. After Harry left up the stairs, pulling the trunks behind him, Cygnus motioned the rest toward to the parlor. Once in there, Cygnus turned to Daphne and asked, "How long has he been able to do that?" he asked. Knowing why her father was so surprised, she said, "Almost from the start. Professors Flitwick and McGonagall keep loaning him advanced charms and transfiguration texts, and he practically devours them. Once he's read them, he practices each and every spell, and once he has both wand movement and incantation correct, he never has to worry about it again. It's learned." "But he shouldn't have the power," started Cygnus before he heard Harry coming back down the stairs. Harry entered and saw Daphne smiling at him while Cygnus, Isabel and Sirius were looking at him a little strangely. Harry didn't know what was going on. Daphne reached out and took his hand as he approached and sat beside her. "Harry, I think we need to show my parents and your godfather that little trick you showed me on Halloween," she said. "All right," said Harry. "No secrets from family. Do you want to do it?" Replying only with a grin in return, she turned to her parents and said, "Watch this." With barely a pause or even loss of eye focus, she began to draw magic into herself. It took only a few moments before Harry literally felt the palpable energy roiling about her. It was making those few small loose items about the room start dancing a little upon what and where they sat. And, of course, her eyes began to glow a little. Cygnus, Isabel, Sirius, and even little Tori were looking back in awe and not a little fear. "Oh, wow," said Tori, first to speak, and not understanding what it looked like to her parents. "That's amazing." Daphne let her magic ease back down before calmly saying to Tori, "Thank you, Tori." The three adults were still sitting there quite stunned. Said Cygnus before he cleared his throat. "I did not realize just how powerful you are, Daphne." Daphne grinned and said, "Wait until you see Harry." Turning to her betrothed, she said, "All right, Harry, your turn." Harry grinned and stood up. Then he quickly started pulling ambient magic into himself. Very quickly, the air about him began to swirl. His hair began to rustle a little with it. Everything became much brighter for him. He felt he could almost see magic moving through the room. He pulled even more in, letting it flow through him and overflow in great gushing waves of it. The area of effect was so wide he could see the hair of all three adults moving about where they sat apart from he and Daphne. Looking down at his betrothed, he watched as her hair moved about, even standing up a little with the charged particles of air. All the while, Daphne just sat there quite calmly. But she was also used to it. Harry then let it flow back out of him, and he let his magic back down to its normal resting state, and calmly sat down again. "Sweet Merlin!" exclaimed Sirius. "You, duh! How in Merlin's name do you do that?" asked Cygnus. Harry calmly told them how he had guessed it could be done while he was in hospital after reading magical theory. He told them how he felt it was a reverse of pushing your magic and was actually pulling magic into yourself. He told them of his belief of how drawing magic in allowed him to cast stronger spells for longer, and how it meant he didn't have to wait anywhere near as long for his magic to recharge if he was approaching magical exhaustion. He also said it left him tired after he did it for quite some time, and he told them how it had to be kept secret, so others did not know they were actually normal on the power scale. It was mainly all for show to make others think they were much more powerful than they really were. So, in the same way as you folks probably originally thought we must be the reincarnation of Merlin and Morgana Le Fay, it comes in handy when you want to scare the bejesus out of a person or people who think of attacking you, said Harry. It looks impressive as hell, and it's fun to watch people's reactions to it when we do it, like yours. But I don't know how useful it will be, or if it's a hindrance in an actual battle. And you can teach this? Asked Isabel, shocked. Nodding, Harry said, Yeah. I taught Daphne within a few minutes. Then a few days later, I taught Neville, Tracy, Susan, Hannah, and Hermione. It didn't take me all that long, Daphne said. Since then we've all practiced it in private and improved in leaps and bounds. With Harry's help, we've all also been practicing doing it while spellcasting. As he said, it appears to have improved our abilities to cast. It makes our spells stronger. And we don't tire as easily. Again, said Sirius, damn. If you like, said Harry with a grin. I'll teach you while we're here on break. It won't take long. He received 4 answering grins. Oh, Tori wants to learn too, does she? He thought. I'll have to run that past her parents first. All right, said Isabel, first to snap out of it. What do you want to do first? Christmas shopping, said Harry. If we can get it out of the way this afternoon, then we're likely to miss the mad rush that will be tomorrow in that place. Fleeing to the leaky cauldron and heading directly into the alley, Harry, Sirius, and the green grasses realized Harry was right to beg to do their final Christmas shopping the day the express arrived. The alley was packed. It would be even worse the next day, Christmas Eve. The party weaved their way down to Gregor's first. They were only picking up some extra galleons. This time, there'd be more than enough time to carry out the rest of his business with the goblins after Christmas, when they weren't so rushed. Besides, his time limit with Dumbledore for the return of property belonging to House Potter expired on Christmas Day. He'd still have to go after Christmas to sack the goblins onto him. After quickly collecting some gold, the group left Gregor's. They immediately split up, with Harry going with Sirius and Astoria while Daphne was with her parents. As soon as they separated, Harry turned to little Astoria and said, Now, my fair maiden, I need to buy a gift or two for your sister. I'm placing a lot of trust in you that you will not use the opportunity to tease your sister about the gifts I purchase for her. Are we agreed? The youngest Greengrass, who had immediately latched onto Harry's hand when it was decided on the split of the group for shopping, pouted and mock-whined, Oh, Harry, I was looking forward to that. Well, I want your promise you won't, he said. Otherwise, the gift I purchase for you will be less. All right, Harry, she mumbled. Thank you, he said. Besides, I was hoping you could help me pick out a gift for her and your parents. That earned him a big grin. I'll be good, I promise, she sweetly said. Looking at his godfather, Harry said, Jewelers first, then Ollivanders, I think. With a smile, Sirius said, Then lead the way. After purchasing what he wanted at the jewelers, and with Sirius's help distracting Astoria while he also purchased something for her, they headed for Ollivanders. It took some sweet talking of the peculiar old man, but Harry was able to purchase what he wanted. From there it was over to the Owl Emporium to pick up supplies for the owls, and visits to a couple of other places. They soon met with the others at Fortescue's before changing groups. Harry was with Cygnus and Isabel, while Daphne went with Sirius and Astoria. This time, the shopping was a lot quicker as he was only needing to purchase something for Sirius. However, he knew Daphne and her group were going to take a little longer. Harry led his 2 to Scribulus Ever-Changing Inks and the other stationery store, and he had a quick walk through memorizing the bookshelves in Flourish and Blots. Just as many of the shops were closing, they returned to Fortescue's. This time, they were the first to arrive. Sirius brought the 2 girls a few minutes later. Ready to head home, are we? Asked Cygnus. Merlin, yes, sighed Sirius. I hate to see what it's going to be like here tomorrow. Harry just smiled. He said, We can always come and have a look if you like. No, said Sirius, raising both hands in surrender. I'm good. As soon as they were back at Greengrass Estate, Harry took his purchases up to his room. He'd wrap them later. He needed to get back downstairs, as it was planned they'd have an early but leisurely dinner. Talk around the table had Astoria trying to wheedle out of both Harry and Daphne what they bought her unsuccessfully, and chit-chat about what the adults and Astoria had been up to while the two older preteens were at Hogwarts. Now that he had his health back, Sirius was working hard to clean up his family London home. He'd also reconnected with his old school friend, Remus Mooney Lupin. "My parents' old home is a mess," he said to Harry. "Their house elf creature is possibly insane. He's done nothing to clean the place since Merlin knows when. So I spend half my time there trying to get him to do his job, and the other half actually doing his job for him." "I would have thought the Blacks had a manor out in the country somewhere," said Harry. "They had one," replied Sirius. "However, older Braxus Malfoy demanded it as dowry for cousin Sissy. I don't know what Grandfather Arcturus was thinking when he agreed to it. But speaking with Great-Aunt Cassiopeia, he told her the place held too many sad memories for him. Plus, he was pushed into it by my Uncle Cygnus, Sissy's father. He moved into a smaller place, and, on his death and as per his wishes, that place was sold with the monies going into the family vaults. It's a pity he passed only a few months before I was released from Azkaban. I might have been able to convince him to keep it. Until I saw the family home in London, I would have thought he'd move in there, even if old Warhorse Walburga, my mother, was still living there. However, as soon as I saw it, I realized why he didn't and why he never sold it. It would have cost more to clean it up than it was worth. And my mother wasn't the nicest of people to be around." "So, you've been busy cleaning out the London home all this time?" asked Harry. "Oh, no," replied Sirius. "I've also been spending quite a bit of time getting the Black finances back into order, learning what I need to be a proper lord, now that I'm on the Wizengamot, getting back in contact with old friends, at least those who still don't think I'm guilty, and otherwise trying to recover my life." "I remember your letter of a month or two ago telling me you'd moved back into the family home," said Harry. "Is that the London one?" "Yes," replied Sirius. "Mooney and I have managed to get enough of the house clean to make parts of it habitable, but it's far from done. It's still a dangerous place to be if you don't know what you're doing." "Then I hope you're being careful," said Harry with concern. With an answering smile, he replied, "Don't worry, Pop. Mooney and I know what we're doing." Isabel then told how she was quite pleased with her research into Muggle-born birth rates, and how she was also looking into how and why the parents of many Muggle-borns were choosing not to allow their children to develop their magical potential. She happily talked about her developing friendship with the Grangers, especially Monica. "It's a very good thing you did making friends with that young Muggle-born witch, Hermione, you two," she said to Harry and Daphne. "Did you know she's named after a character from a Shakespearean play?" "I did," replied Harry. "She's a character out of The Winter's Tale. I asked her once about it, and it was a play her parents went to see the night they believed she was conceived." "I didn't know that," said Daphne, a little surprised. Said Harry with a verbal nod. "It kind of embarrasses her." "Well, the records from that British registrar's office Monica is able to get for me are heaven sent," said Isabel. "It's making things a lot easier for me to get my report finalized way ahead of my original schedule." "About Hermione," said Harry. "I was worried about how she was being treated by some of the other students at Hogwarts. There was this one incident. It does not matter. However, I decided to offer her the opportunity to fall under the protection of House Potter." "We heard," said Cygnus with a knowing smile. "It was a very Slytherin thing to do, Harry." Seeing the look on Harry's face of surprise mixed with confusion, Isabel said, "Hermione wrote her parents about it, and Monica asked me what it meant. They're just a little confused as to why you did it." "Oh," said Harry. "Well, I could see the writing on the wall, so to speak. Many, especially in Slytherin, know they cannot attack me directly, whether it's about our betrothal or that I'm supposedly the one that defeated their master. I know they're not happy with me. I could see they were starting to figure out the way to hurt me was through my friends. Neville, Tracy, Susan, and Hannah are all from ancient houses with their own protections, such as house alliances. Hermione, however, was only protected through the bonds of friendship, and that she's a Muggle-born was another risk. I looked into whether an alliance could be offered to her through her parents or directly with her, But as she doesn't belong to a recognized wizarding house, that option was not open to us, and that's when I found I could offer her protection directly through the protection ritual. I'm just glad she accepted. For her, the benefits include she's now seen as having all the rights of a pure-blood member of an ancient house. The sign she's a protectee is plain to see on her robes. She can now consider herself to being a lot closer to our social equals in our circle of friends, and it reduces the slurs and verbal attacks she's had to go through until then. For me, I get to thumb my nose at the bigots. A close friend of mine is now better protected within our society, especially within Hogwarts, which make me breathe easier, and more importantly, my friend cannot be treated like chattel or scum by those who try to take advantage of her. What I don't understand, as none of the books I've read about it are clear on the matter, is what this does regarding her magical guardianship. Nothing was mentioned what happens when the protectee is an unemancipated minor, and about her magical guardian, all I could find is that her head of house, Professor McGonagall, should be hers. But I know the professor has seen the protectee crest and hasn't said anything to either of us about it, which doesn't make much sense. "You won't need to worry about that, Harry," said Cygnus with a wide grin. "I thought it was such a brilliant idea for all the reasons you covered that I'll be offering the protection of House Greengrass to her parents on Boxing Day, and will also be offering to be your friend's magical guardians. After all," he said, "I can't let you be the only one who gets to thumb their nose at the bigots." Harry sat there in shock. That was not something he expected. Sirius, with a wide grin of his own, leaned over and ruffled Harry's hair. "Brilliant, like your mother, and a great prank on the bigoted gets, which would make your father proud." With a slight scowl, Harry firmly said, "I didn't do it as a prank, Sirius." "I know," he simply said. "The great pranks often aren't done as a prank, but they are, nevertheless. The only Christmas Day Harry had really experienced was while a 5-month-old infant. From then on, until this day, Christmas Day was a day of sadness for him. All he got to do was watch Dudley open his presents and have fun, and he had to act like it was such a great day, so Dudley wouldn't be upset there was someone sad near him. But today he was part of a real family. Today he truly got to enjoy. Having woken early, he lay in bed wondering what he would enjoy more. Would he enjoy opening his own presents more than watching others open presents he bought them? Or vice versa? Or would it be more the feeling of being part of something, a family, as everyone enjoyed the day? He didn't know, but he was looking forward to finding out. The night they arrived back on the Hogwarts Express, Harry carefully wrapped the gifts he'd purchased for his family and friends. Hedwig, knowing she would soon be delivering some of them, was watching him carefully from her perch. At the right moment she was hooting and barking as Harry worked, and in response Harry was talking with her. "So, who first, do you think, Hed?" he asked her. "Shall it be shortest path to each heading out? Or should I give you one gift at a time to deliver?" She huffed and snuffled in response. "How about I have you delivered 2 at a time? That way it's only a few trips." Harry pulled out a map of the island he'd purchased from Flourish and Blots and laid it on the floor. He carefully mapped the towns where he knew his friends lived, and looked at how Hedwig was likely to fly to each. He said. "Tracy's coming over later in the day, so no need to deliver hers. I could hold off on sending Hermione's, as she'll be here on Boxing Day. That leaves Neville, Susan and Hannah. How about a single trip with 3 stops, girl?" he asked. Hedwig barked and bobbed her head. With a grin back, he said, "Excellent idea. We shall do that." Harry then pulled out the gifts for the 3 and took them over to his desk, next to Hedwig's owl perch. "Okay, Neville, at Longbottom Hall under your left wing, Susan at the ossuary under the right wing, and Hannah at the refectory on your right ankle," he mused. He quickly wrapped each gift in a sheet of parchment, wrote the name of the recipient on it in large letters, and shrank it down. Hedwig hopped down onto the desk, and Harry quickly and securely tied the packages to her harness and ankle. He walked over to the window and opened it right up for her. "Operation Ha 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 is a go, girl," he grinned. Hedwig gave 3 quick hoots and took off out the window. After watching her fly off for a few moments, Harry quickly closed the window with a grin. As he was about to turn around from the direction of the door, he heard Daphne say, "Just how in tune with one another you and Hedwig are still amazes me." When he turned to look at the door with the same grin on his face, he saw his betrothed leaning against the frame with her arms and legs both crossed, a small smile on her face. He crossed the room, took her in his arms, and gave her a peck on her cheek. "You're lucky you didn't come in here an hour ago when I was still wrapping gifts," he said. "Oh?" she asked, sinking into his arms. "Yes, I would have spanked your bottom for you for attempting to find out what your present is," he gleefully said. "You wouldn't," she gasped, pushing him away. "I would," he returned. Then he grinned mischievously. "Maybe I should give you a taste of what to expect." Daphne took one look at his expression, adopted one of mock horror, and took off towards the stairs with a very un-Daphne squeal. Harry took off in pursuit, trying to laugh maniacally. But that was 2 days ago. Now lying in bed, Harry was wondering when he should get up. He didn't want to seem too eager by getting downstairs too soon, but he also didn't want to be the cause of everyone waiting for him to rise so they could get to the gift-giving part. He was just about to get up when the bedroom door flew open and a small brunette-haired human missile came hurtling in and leapt up onto Harry's bed with a cry of "Harry!" and onto him. "Oof!" he cried, when one of her knees landed in a tender spot. As Harry was lying on his back, the brunette missile, otherwise known as Astoria, decided to sit astraddle his stomach, grab him by the shoulders, and shake him. "Come on!" she cried. "Get up! Get up! Get up!" "Help!" he cried out, turning his head towards the open door. "I'm being attacked by a harpy." Tori grabbed his chin in her hand and spun his head to look back at her. "Get out of bed, Mr. Potter!" she demanded, glaring at him before grabbing him by the shoulders and shaking him again. "I want to open prescience." "All right," he cried back. With a final glare at him, Tori used his stomach as a springboard to climb back off him before then bouncing off the bed to land on her feet beside it. Harry groaned for a moment and tried to curl into a ball from the abuse to his stomach muscles before he suddenly found the blankets reefed off him. "Hey!" he cried. "Get up!" Tori stamped her foot. "All right, already," he grumble-yelled, swinging his feet off the side of the bed. Tori stood just a ways from the bed, glaring impatiently at him. "As soon as I've had my morning shower, he tried. "No," she stamped her foot. "Now." She spun away and went to his wardrobe, bringing out a normal working robe. She threw it at him and said, "Just pull that on over your pajamas. I can still take the gift I bought you back to the shop and get my money back, you know." He half snarled back, pulling the robe over his head. With a gasp, she said, "You wouldn't dare." "Don't push me, young lady," he said, settling the robes around himself. Mumbling, he said, "Now, footwear." Before he had a chance to do anything, Tori grabbed him by the left hand and literally dragged him out of his room at a near run towards the stairs. "No time," she called over her shoulder. "Tori," tried Harry. She ignored him and dragged him down the stairs into the parlor where the tree with presents under it were found. Everyone else had already gathered there. "He's up!" she happily exclaimed to the laughing adults and Daphne. With a groan, Harry staggered over and collapsed into a loveseat next to Daphne while everyone else was still laughing. Tori almost bounced across the room and into an armchair, clapping her hands in excitement. Staring daggers at the clearly excited younger girl, he snarled, "I find myself pitying your future husband." Tori just poked her tongue out at him with a happy smile on her face. The adults in the room had clearly been laughing for a while. Harry was even sure he'd heard them while Tori was abusing him earlier. Chuckling herself, Daphne put her arm around him and kissed him on the cheek. "I'm sorry no one warned you, but no one gets to sleep in on Christmas Day in this family. Tori makes sure of that." "I was thinking of getting up anyway," he grumbled, just not so enthusiastically. Still grinning, Cygnus said, "Now shall we start with oldest first or youngest?" Tori cried out. "Youngest it is," replied Cygnus with a grin. A quick rustle threw wrapped presents under the tree, and Cygnus handed her the first gift. Harry noticed he didn't even look at the name tag, so he was expecting hers to be first. He was amused to watch her near shred the wrapping paper to get to the gift within. Another reach into the mass of presents and one was passed around to Harry. Harry was surprised to find he was receiving a gift so quickly. A set of good quality fine-point quills. Daphne's was a gift of the same. Sirius received Harry's first gift to others, a male necklace with 3 pewter charms hanging from it, a lily flower between a stag and a wolf. By the look on his face, Harry knew he chose right. As the gifts were passed around for the first round, when he was being passed his second gift, he asked Cygnus to pass to Daphne a particular gift. It was a small wrapped box hidden just inside the lower branches of the tree. Passing it around to Daphne, everyone carefully watched, even excited Tori. Carefully unwrapping it, Daphne found a small, flat, polished wooden box. She opened it, and her eyes went wide and her hands shook a little. She sat there staring at the contents. Harry hopped out of his seat, walked around behind Daphne, and reached over her shoulder to the largest item inside the box. Carefully drawing it out, he held it by its chain and turned it around so everyone else could see it. It was a beautiful and delicate silver chain with an ornamental sapphire surrounded in silver filigree. "Oh, wow," said Tori, the only one to make a sound. Harry carefully undid the clasp, drew it around Daphne's throat and reaffixed the clasp at the base of her neck. Leaning forward, he planted a kiss on the top of her head before walking back around the seat and sitting back down. "Do you want to show them what else is in there?" he asked her. Daphne turned the case around and held it up so everyone else could see. It held a pair of matching sapphire earrings to the necklace. "They're beautiful, Daphne," said Isabel. Daphne just nodded in response. She turned the case back around, closed it, and placed it on her lap before turning to Harry, cupping his cheek in her palm and gently placing a kiss on his lips. She stared into his eyes while hers were watering a little. "Everything that's in my vaults will be yours someday," said Harry loud enough for the rest to hear. "Therefore giving you a gift from the vaults didn't seem right. So this marks the first piece from the Lady Daphne Potter collection." Clearing his throat, Cygnus reached into the stack and pulled out one for Sirius. "A selection of joke products from Tori. To help you find the prankster in you again," she said. Sirius laughed and said, "An excellent idea, Tori." Harry's gift to Tori was a necklace with tiny diamond pendant, which made her squeal in delight. She then demanded Harry put it on for her, which he was happy to do. He gifted a sterling silver desk set to Cygnus and a choker with a scented emerald to Isabel. Sirius and Daphne also received from Harry charmed wand holsters similar to those used by Aurors, both made of dragon hide and charmed to be invisible at will. Harry was surprised to find Sirius and the Greengrasses had gifted him a Nimbus 2000 broom, together with a good quality broom servicing kit for it, among other things. "We had 10 years of Christmas and birthday gifts to make up for." "Pup," said Sirius, when Harry looked at him and the others in awe and gratitude. "And if you make the Quidditch team for Ravenclaw next year," said Cygnus, "we'll be providing you with the armor you're going to need." After the gifting ended, Harry was able to carry his hoard upstairs to his room and get in a quick shower and other ablutions before he had to race down for breakfast. He was told he wasn't allowed to try out the broom until after the morning meal. As soon as he was able and allowed, Harry had his new broom out and was flinging it about the sky towards the rear of the house. He didn't notice Daphne and Astoria come out carrying their own brooms or see the adults follow them. Instead of joining him, Daphne and Astoria watched him fly. It really hadn't taken that long for Harry to get used to the broom, and before long he was carrying out feats of flying that had the 2 girls and Sirius gaping in awe, while the Greengrass elders watched worriedly. "He can really fly," said Sirius with a gasp. At one point, Harry drove the broom vertical straight up. At about 200 feet up, he stalled the broom, allowing it flip over backwards before pointing it straight down. He only pulled up about 3 feet off the ground before angling the brown upwards at about 45 degrees and executing a double barrel roll. Practically hopping off the broom in mid-flight, he caused the broom to skid across the sky before performing a corkscrew turn. When he finally saw the others collected on the back patio, he brought the broom down and to a halt with a 1-foot skid before lightly stepping off the back of it. "Wow, that was fun," he happily exclaimed. Everyone stared back at him in shock. Both girls and Sirius were staring at him in awe. Hello," he said. The first to find her voice, Daphne asked, "Where did you learn to fly like that?" "You taught me, remember?" replied Harry. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I just taught you to fly. I didn't teach you what you did just then." "I read about those moves in Quidditch magazines," he replied with a shrug. "I find them lying around the Ravenclaw common room all the time. They have lovely pictures, both showing and demonstrating the moves, and I just thought I'd try some of them." "How much flying have you done, Harry?" asked Sirius. "Well, there were the couple of hours where Daphne, ably assisted by Tori, showed me when I was here during the last couple of days of August," said Harry, scratching the back of his head. "Then there was the couple of flying lessons on those old school brooms we had at Hogwarts in September, before Madam Hooch said I wasn't to come back." "That's it. And why did Madam Hooch tell you not to return?" asked Isabel. "She told me I nearly gave her a heart attack when I performed a sloth grip roll," replied Harry, as if it was the greatest injustice ever. "I think I need to send Professor Flitwick an owl," muttered Cygnus. Harry ignored the comment and turned to the two girls. "Coming up, ladies?" he asked. "With guests coming over after lunch, this'll probably be our last chance for a couple of days." With one hand, Harry pointed the tip of the handle away from himself at about 30 degrees and set the broom in motion. As it began to pull away, he merely stepped onto the handle where it joined the bristles, and, after it climbed a few feet, dropped himself into a sitting position, straddling it. The girls soon followed him up, and they flew gently about the sky for a while. Harry had lost all track of time when he spied Sirius back out on the back patio motioning for them to come down. When Harry landed in front of him, the girls a few seconds behind, he said, "Lunchtime, time to put the brooms away. Guests will start arriving soon." With a bit of good-natured whining and moaning, Harry and the girls secured their brooms. First to visit was the Davis family. Harry was finally introduced to the full brood, but was almost immediately dragged off by Tracy. She seemed to be expecting something, and wasn't being half obvious about it. Harry grinned and led her into the parlor. Searching through the last few presents that remained under the tree, he fished out his gift to her. With a grin, Tracy ripped off the wrapping paper and held in her hands her own Oro-style wrist wand holster. When she read the instructions with it, Harry watched her eyebrows rise in surprise. "Harry, we're not supposed to have these," she said. "These are only supposed to be for auras and unspeakables." "It's amazing how well gold talks," said Harry with a shrug. "Or when your name is Harry Potter," said Daphne, just a touch mock-snidely. He just grinned at her. His gift from Tracy was a portable wizarding radio. Tracy was remaining for the rest of the day, but the rest of the Davis clan had to depart. Not too long later, Neville visited. "Neville," said Harry happily, giving his only male mate a manly hug. "Merry Christmas, mate." "Merry Christmas, Harry," replied the other boy with a grin of his own. Neville then withdrew from his robes a couple of gifts. He handed one each to Harry and Daphne. Apparently he'd owl-delivered Tracy's to her earlier, not knowing she was going to be there. The boy also showed Harry the wand holster already affixed to his wand arm. He gave it a light flick and his wand popped into his hand. Another light flick and it disappeared back up and into the holster. The holster faded away almost immediately afterwards. "Uncle Algy said to tell you you're a naughty boy for purchasing and gifting these," said Neville with a grin. "But he also heartily approves, considering what we know. He's who taught me how to properly use it." Nodding, Harry said, "So officially I'm in trouble, and unofficially I've done a good thing." Grinning, Neville replied, "That's about the heart of it, yes." Tracy stayed for dinner, and a bit later afterwards, but Neville had to return home as Gran said he had to be home before she had to leave to attend the Yule Ball. The same Yule Ball Cygnus, Isabel and Sirius had to attend. Early the next morning, Harry had to be out of bed early again because the Grangers were coming. All three adults went to the Grangers' house south of London and brought them back via side-along apparition. As they arrived, a house elf turned up to ensure none of them was going to be sick. It was a first for all three. Harry, Daphne and Astoria were waiting for them in the parlor. After the exchange of pleasantries, a few gifts were exchanged. The Granger elders were embarrassed that they had only brought a small gift for both Greengrasses, to which it was simply waved off as being of no consequence. Harry also helped Hermione fit her wand holster and told her how it would keep her wand invisible for muggles not cleared under the statute of secrecy. It pleased Hermione greatly as her grandmother wasn't cleared yet and allowed the young witch to carry her wand on her person at all times. Immediately after Harry sat down again, Cygnus turned to the Grangers and asked Wendell, "Monica, what has Hermione told you about her protectee status from the noble and most ancient house of Potter?" She said Harry did it to protect her and that it meant the chance of her being attacked in future was greatly diminished as a result, he said, before turning to Harry and saying, "And thank you for doing that, by the way." Harry just nodded in response. "Good," said Cygnus. "That much is correct, but there's more to it than that." He then went into detail about Hermione's protectee status and what it meant for both her and Harry, and he covered what it meant for Hermione, social status-wise. He also covered what it meant for making purchases in Diagon Alley and Hogsmeade. Then he came to his next point, magical guardianship of Hermione. He spoke about how all Muggle-born unemancipated minors were assigned a magical guardian when they entered Hogwarts, and that the guardian was supposed to be their head of house. In Hermione's case, that should be Professor McGonagall. "But how can this be?" asked Monica. "We only met her the once, and that was only for about half an hour when she brought Hermione's acceptance letter. She never told us about this magical guardian business. I believe it's because she probably thought it would make you reconsider sending Hermione into our world for her schooling," he replied. "Damned right," huffed Wendell. Cygnus also pointed out how Professor McGonagall didn't say a word to either Harry or Hermione when the protectee symbol of the house crest of the Protector appeared on her robes. If she was behaving as a magical guardian should, then she should have investigated immediately. "What I want to do for you is two things," he said. "First, I would like to know if you'd be interested in formally assigning Hermione's magical guardianship to me. And second, I would like to know if you'd be interested in being protectees under the noble and most ancient house of Greengrass, or either. I do not expect you to make a decision about either matter right now. However, I do hope you will give it serious consideration." "But why would you want to?" asked Monica. With a wide smile, Cygnus said, "An excellent question. Firstly, because your daughter has become close friends with my daughter and her betrothed. I see it as an excellent way to protect them both. Secondly, you have become friends with my Isabel and it would make her very happy to know you were protected. And what makes her happy makes my life easier. Thirdly, there is a belief out in Wizarding Britain that the Greengrass family is a dark family who espouses the bigoted pure-blood beliefs. Placing muggles, such as yourself, under our protection sends out a very clear message that we are not what they believe us to be. And fourth, it is a way for House Greengrass and House Potter to further show a strong alliance betwixt our houses, with Hermione under the protection of House Potter and you under the protection of House Greengrass." Nodding, Wendell said, "Hermione mentioned something in her letters about sheep and land. I couldn't really make sense of it, but it sounds important." Harry burst into laughter. "Sorry," he chortled. "I'm not laughing at you, more at the situation." Chuckling himself, Cygnus replied, "As a protectee, Hermione is required to allow Harry to graze his sheep on her land if he asked it of her. As Hermione doesn't own any land, Harry can't well ask her. However, since Harry doesn't own any sheep, it doesn't matter anyway. You'll also be pleased to know I don't own any sheep either, and I have no intention of purchasing any." That earned Cygnus a few surprised blinks of eyes. "That sounds rather antiquated," said Monica. "It reflects how old the law surrounding this actually is," replied Cygnus. "Other requirements are, you may not raise arms against me without first publicly stating you have chosen to forego my protection. If I go to war, you must provide suitable strapping men of fighting age to aid me, if they're available, which means those over the age of 15 and under the age of 35, and you may not accept protection status of another house without first ending it with mine." "So you're really doing this just to protect us?" asked Monica. "There's nothing else to it?" "It may be more accurate to say we're doing this to protect the family of Hermione Granger," said Cygnus, "and because my wife wants to reward those who have assisted her." "But it was such a small thing for us to do," said Wendell. "It's a big thing you're offering in return." Smiling, Cygnus replied, "And we feel the opposite. What you felt was a small thing to do is a big thing for my wife, and what you feel is a big thing I'm offering is really only a small thing in return. It's a matter of perception. Now, we also promised you an explanation of betrothal contracts, said Cygnus, leaning forward. I'll stick to generalities as the conditions of Harry's and Daphne's betrothal are a private matter between our two houses. I'll first cover how marriage is recognized in the Muggle, your world, and then how it is in the magical world. This will give you a basis of understanding why betrothal contracts exist in the magical world. Agreed? Both Wendell and Monica nodded, as did Hermione. Excellent, because I did a great deal of homework into Muggle customs to prepare for this conversation, and I'd hate to see all that work go to waste, he smiled. First, marriage contracts still exist in the Muggle world. They are often used in nations such as India, Africa, and Persian Gulf nations, and in cultures such as Judaism and Arabian. Further, they are still occasionally seen in monarchic cultures of the upper echelons of society, including here in Muggle Great Britain. You're now also starting to see a return to similar contracts in general Western culture with what is known as a prenuptial agreement, or prenup, and premarital agreements. A written agreement, of course, is simply another name for a contract without it having the scary connotations. Now, the reason they went out of favor in the first place is because the law changed to allow what was believed to be a fair dissolution of property between separating spouses. And that came about because property brought into the marriage or gained during the marriage legally became what is known as community property. That is, the property is jointly and equally owned by both husband and wife. With me so far, all the adults and even some of the children nodded. Good. However, in the magical world, society still follows what came before community property. For Muggle society, this only happened less than a century ago, and it's known as coverture. That is, all that is brought into a marriage by the wife is considered the property of the husband, and the wife only has property that is allowed her by the husband. The wife becomes femme covert, a covered woman. Now that might sound barbaric, but I remind you, it was still the law in the Muggle world until very recently, and is still the law in other parts of the world. Because of the law of coverture and in the magical world, the families of the females born into one of the important houses wanted to ensure that, if there became a problem that required the marriage to be magically and legally dissolved, the property brought into the marriage by the wife could be recovered. As parents of a daughter, I'm sure you see the wisdom of that. Both Grangers nodded. Further, there comes the issue for the ancient houses and what's called primogeniture birthright, he continued. Something even the Muggle world needs to deal with in a monarchical society such as Great Britain. Succession in the magical world is incredibly important, probably more so than it is in the Muggle world outside of the royal family. Without a betrothal contract, if Daphne and Harry were to marry, then something happened to me. The lordship of House Greengrass would flow directly to Daphne through primogeniture, then instantly to Harry, as her husband, under coverture. He would become Lord Greengrass and head of House Greengrass. With that power, he could legally wreak havoc on House Greengrass, including subsuming House Greengrass into House Potter, thereby effectively ending the Greengrass line. Some of the adults gasped in shock while the Grangers looked stunned. After the shocked mutterings ended, Cygnus continued, "This is where the wisdom of a betrothal contract comes into play, as they're used to put a stop to that sort of nonsense. For example, I may have foreseen such a situation and put clauses in the contract to stop that." Cygnus looked at Harry, who nodded. "First, the contract may, and I'm not saying it does, mind you, include a stipulation where Daphne is required to bear for Harry at least 2 male children. That's normal in these situations. The first would become Lord Potter on Harry's death, or if he were to pass on the lordship earlier, their second-born son would have the name Greengrass and would take up the head of House Greengrass on his 11th birthday and the lordship on his 17th. To protect that further, if there is no second son, we might have decided the titles would transfer to Astoria's second oldest son or Daphne's eldest daughter, or some other familial member of Greengrass blood. Plus, there may also be a stipulation Harry continue to keep the business interests of both houses as separate entities and run them side by side. That way, Daphne's second-born son will have a fully established house to inherit, and the Greengrass line will continue. Harry then leaned forward and said, "Having now thought about this for a while, I'm quite sure that, considering the danger of the war they were in at the time, and that they were Aurors, magical police, fighting in that war, both my father and Cygnus knew there was a risk to House Greengrass of that occurring, if Daphne and House Greengrass weren't immediately protected by a betrothal contract. It has become clear to me my father was always one when went beyond the norm to protect his friends, and that protecting House Greengrass for Cygnus may have been part of what went through his mind when he agreed to the contract." Cygnus looked surprised and said, "That actually makes a lot of sense. Your father was always willing to, as you put it, go beyond the norm to protect his friends, and yes, much of what's in the betrothal contract goes towards protecting the interests of House Greengrass." Turning more fully to Harry, he said, "But it also goes a long way towards protecting the interests of House Potter. Don't ever forget that." After more general conversation, the adults returned the Grangers back to their home so they could begin their road trip to Wendell's mother's home. The Grangers swore to give what was offered to them due thought and would let Cygnus know as soon as they had decided. Wanting to get his business with the goblins out of the way early, Harry asked permission to take Daphne and visit Gringotts the day after Boxing Day. The next day, a Friday. Sirius immediately piped up and asked if Harry wouldn't mind an escort. "I have no problem with that," he replied. Hearing Sirius would be escorting the two preteens, Isabel gave her permission for Harry and Daphne to go. A quick trip through the flue, with Harry again landing face first on the floor of the leaky cauldron, they were through the back door of the pub and out into the alley. As they mounted the stairs to enter the bank, all three caused their postures to become more erect and strode in. Walking up to the first available teller, Harry waited until the goblin looked up at him. He said, "Good morning, teller. I hope gold continues to flow into your vaults, and your enemies are no longer." With an answering grin, the goblin said, "It is and they are, young wizard. What do you want?" "I come seeking audience with Account Keeper Bloodfang," replied Harry. "Please be so kind as to inform him Mr. Potter is here to see him." The goblin reached down under his counter, brought back up a sheet of parchment, and using an old gnarled root and ink, wrote a short note. He folded it in half and dropped it into a slot. Looking back up, he said, "A message has been sent to Account Keeper Bloodfang. You await him, young wizard. An escort will be with you shortly. May your business this day prove profitable. Please step back." Harry gave a very slight bow in response and backed away from the teller station. He rejoined Daphne and Sirius away from the tellers in the middle of the hall. Less than a minute later, a younger-looking goblin approached Harry and said, "Please follow me, Mr. Potter." He turned on his heel and started walking away. Harry took Daphne's hand in the crook of his elbow and followed. Sirius was walking behind them. The goblin led Harry and his party to the same office he was in on the first day he walked into Diagon Alley. The goblin knocked on the door and paused a moment before opening it and ushering the three inside. Not entering himself, the young goblin then closed the door behind them. "Mr. Potter," said Bloodfang, "how may Gringotts provide service to you today?" "A couple of matters are of interest, Account Keeper Bloodfang, my friend," replied Harry. "First, these are my betrothed, Miss Daphne Greengrass, and my godfather, Lord Sirius Black," he introduced them. After the required pleasantries, Harry asked, "Now, has Wizard Albus Dumbledore finally returned that property which belongs to me?" "He has, except for 2 magical artifacts, 7 books of advanced magic of quite some age, and an amount of gold," replied the goblin, looking at the inventory before him. "One is an invisibility cloak owned by your family for generations. The other is a solicitor's pensieve of the highest quality, clearly marked with the Potter family crest." "I see," said Harry. "Do you know where those 2 magical artifacts and books might be at this time?" "We believe all 9 items are in the headmaster's office at Hogwarts Castle." "And what is the amount of gold?" 9,258 garn 9 septingwin ser. 9,258 garnions, 9 sickles and 14 knots. "I shall also require a copy of the inventory of items returned plus their current location," said Harry. He thought for a moment and said, I believe pursuing Wizard Dumbledore for the gold will cost greater effort than the gold is worth if he is unwilling to return it. However, I have been more than fair concerning the return of my property. How much would it cost me for the goblins to effect recovery of my property still in the hands of Wizard Dumbledore? The goblin looked down at his notes for a moment before looking up with an avaricious grin. He replied, 9,258 krent. Sirius burst into laughter while Harry struggled to keep it in. And you don't consider the price a little steep, the Count-Keeper Bloodfang? Asked Harry. If it is an amount you're willing to forgo when it is rightfully yours, clearly you do not place much value on it, replied the goblin. That time even Harry laughed. All right, my friend, he said to the goblin, once he'd calmed down a little. Recover it all from Wizard Dumbledore, including the gold, then you may keep the gold as payment for this service. However, I shall not forget your shenanigans here, this day. The goblin grinned in what Harry thought was happily before he ducked his head down and wrote a few things on parchment. Now I also wish access to the Potter private properties, so I may investigate them, said Harry. Nodding, the goblin wrote on another sheet of parchment, folded it in half, and dropped it into a slot on his desk. Your ring is able to take you to each property simply by pressing on the stone and speaking the name of the property. However, I've assumed you want others to go with you as well. I've ordered reusable portkeys to be made for Potter Manor, Potter's Retreat and the Winter House, and they shall be with us momentarily, said the goblin. Potter's cottage has been claimed by the Ministry and we still await your order about whether or not to claim it back or demand payment for it. Lily's pad is here in the alley and you only need to press on your ring and say Lily's pad for it to become visible to you. And I've left out the Shrieking Shack in Hogsmeade as it does not require any special access at this point to enter. And finally, I would like to add my godfather here, said Harry, pointing over his shoulder, to have access to the Potter vaults when I am otherwise unavailable. The goblin took one look at Sirius and ducked his head to write on yet another sheet of parchment. This, too, he folded in half and dropped it into the slot on his desk. As he was dropping it in, there was a ding sound from his desk. While he was writing, Sirius had leaned forward and said to Harry, You don't need to do that, Harry. I can easily loan you the gold if you need it, and you can pay me back later. No, Sirius, you don't understand, said Harry, giving his head a little shake. I want you to have access in case I need you to fetch me an heirloom or something. I know you wouldn't have an issue with loaning me the gold. I've ordered a duplicate key to the Potter vaults for Lord Black. It too shall be here momentarily, the goblin cut in. He reached into a box and withdrew 3 coloured quoit rings. Placing them down one at a time, he identified them as one each for Potter Manor, Potter's Retreat, and the Winter House. However, due to Ministry regulations, the second 2 could not be used unless used within the country in which the property lies. While he was describing those, the box dinged again. Harry picked up the 3 quoits. The goblin reached back into his box and withdrew a large gold key identical to the one Harry had for his vaults. The goblin offered Sirius a ceremonial dagger to blood imprint it, but Sirius declined it. Instead, he picked the key up and dropped it into a vest pocket of his robes. Lastly, the goblin slid over a copy of the inventory Harry wanted. He picked it up, scanned down the list, then folded it and placed it in his pocket with a muttered, "Thank you." "Does this conclude your business with Gringotts this day, Mr. Potter?" asked the goblin. "It does," said Harry, starting to rise. Just before leaving, he turned to the old goblin and said, "May your enemies continue to tremble with fear at mention of your name, and may gold continue to flow into your vaults, even if some it was mine." The old goblin barked with laughter as Harry walked out. "I believe working with you will have gold flowing freely into both our vaults, Mr. Potter," the old goblin said a little fondly, once the door was closed. As they left the front entrance of the bank, Harry asked, "Have we time to quickly check out my mother's old place?" Sirius nodded and said, "I can't see why not. I remember it's here in the alley somewhere." "It's this way," said Harry, leading them a little deeper down the alley. When they came to Scribulus Ever-Changing Inks, Harry pressed the stone on his ring and whispered to it, "Lily's pad." A door appeared in the wall between Scribulus's and the cafe next door. Taking both by the hand, Harry walked Daphne and Sirius up to the door. "Do you see it?" he asked them. "See what, Pop?" asked Sirius, looking around. Daphne, also looking around, said, "I can't see anything I'm supposed to see." He let go of Sirius's hand and knuckled his ring onto the brass plate where he felt a lock should be. He heard a click and opened the door. Still holding Daphne, he pushed her lightly through the door and heard her say, "Ah," as the ward effectively broke for her. Turning around, he saw Sirius about to walk off and had to grab him. He then dragged Sirius through the ward at the door to join Daphne, who was standing on the steps just inside. Sirius said, "Oh, we just passed through a notice me not ward." Harry nodded to Sirius and turned to look where they were. Other than the small area of flat floor in front of the external door, immediately in front was a set of stairs leading up a full flight. Harry started to climb the stairs and grabbed Daphne by the hand as he passed. At the top of the stairs was another door. Harry simply turned the door handle and the door opened away from him. "Let's have a look, shall we?" he said, turning to Daphne. Turning back, he walked through to the door. Inside, they saw a small apartment. They had entered into a small lounge area with a dining area off to one side and a kitchen beyond that. However, before they could go any further, a house elf appeared and glared at them with its arms crossed. It said, "Who be you?" Suddenly, its eyes opened wide in surprise, staring at Harry. With a squeal of "Master Harry," it dashed forward and hugged Harry around the thighs. It quickly backed off, saw Sirius and said, "Master Siri." It ignored Daphne. Looking back at Harry, it said, "Welcome back, Master Harry. We've been waiting for you." "And just who would you be, little one?" asked Harry. "I be Ninny," replied the elf with a bow. "I was Mistress Lily's personal elf." And it stood up proudly. "Now I be yours." The little house elf stood there wearing what looked like a set of abbreviated wizarding robes with the House Potter crest in one-tone embroidery on the right side of the breast. Then, "Hello, Ninny," said Harry. Turning towards the others, he said, "You clearly know my godfather, Lord Sirius Black, and this lovely young lady standing next to me is my betrothed, Miss Daphne Greengrass." The little elf came forward and used both hands to take the back of the fingers of Daphne's right hand and press her forehead to them. "Miss Daffy," it said, "you be next Lady Potter, yes?" Yes," said Daphne. Thinking for a bit, Harry asked, "You said, Weene, are there any other Potter elves?" "There be 7 more, Master Harry," replied the elf. "There be 3 at Potter Manor, 2 at Potter's Retreat, and 2 at Winterhouse." Thinking a bit, he asked, "Can you call the 3 from Potter Manor to come here so we may meet them?" "Oh yes," the little elf replied gleefully. It seemed to hesitate for a few moments with a frown on its face before it suddenly snapped its fingers. 3 more elves suddenly turned up. "Master Harry," said the lead elf, or at least the one in front, and all 3 elves bowed. "I be Petey," said the elf in front. "I be Collie," said the next. "I be Rizzy," said the third. Then, "Hello, Petey." "Callie and Rizzy," replied Harry. Turning to Sirius, Harry asked, "Do you recognize these elves, Sirius?" "I didn't until they turned up, Harry," he replied. "Now I do. It must have something to do with where they're from being unplottable and under a hiding charm. I had completely forgotten they even existed." Turning back to the elves, Harry introduced them to Daphne as his betrothed. Each then came forward and did the same strange gesture of holding her right-hand fingers, palm out, to their foreheads. "That's quite the peculiar thing to do," mused Harry. Daphne turned to him and said, "They're recognizing me as the next Lady Potter. It's an elf custom related to their magic." All 4 elves nodded when Harry turned back to them. "All right," he mused. Looking at the latest 3, he asked, "And what do you guys do at Potter Manor?" Petey stepped forward again and said, "I be Master's personal elf. I take care of personal living spaces." Callie stepped forward and said, "I be cook and take care of other spaces." And Rizzy said, "I take care of gardens, greenhouses, and stables." "I take it you all help each other out too?" asked Harry. He saw 4 elf heads nod in response. "Do you feel you are busy enough at the moment?" "Rizzy busy in spring and summer," said Rizzy. "Not so busy in winter." Petey, Callie, and Ninny all looked sad, and Petey said, "We busy once family come back to live in Potter Manor. "We're not busy now." Looking at Sirius, Harry grinned before turning back to the elves. "Master Sirius has a big home in London," he said. "The house elf there, Creature, is not doing his job." "We know Creature," said Petey, looking a little angry. "Creature is a bad elf." "Well," said Harry, "Master Sirius needs help in cleaning his big home up. It has not been cleaned in a very long time. If Master Sirius calls you, would you please go and help him clean his home up? You have my permission to do so." All four elves just about bounced on the spot in excitement. "Oh yes! Oh yes! Harry!" exclaimed Sirius. Harry turned to him and said, "They need to work, Sirius. You know that? And they've been pretty much idle for over a decade now. You'd be doing them a favor if you let them clean that old place up for you." "Yeah, I would, wouldn't I?" said Sirius, before he let out a sigh. "All right, they can do it. I'll be sure to call them when I return." Harry grasped Sirius's arm in a reassuring manner before turning back to the elves. "All right, then," said Harry to the four of them. "We're going to have a look around here, then. We're headed back to Greengrass Estate. We plan on visiting Potter Manor sometime over the next couple days, so I'll see you then." The other three all bowed before disappearing, leaving Ninny behind. "All right, Ninny," he said to her, "how about you show us this place and then we'll be on our way?" Ninny nodded and showed them around. Lily's pad had the lounge they were standing in with the almost mandatory large fireplace, and a small balcony overlooking Diagon Alley was also accessed from there. The small alcove dining room with a table set for 6, the small kitchen they could just see from the lounge until they walked in to have a better look. A bedroom with a queen bed, walk-in robe and dressing table, and 2 bedside tables and an office. The office also contained 2 fold-away cots. Indicating the largest couch, she described how it was also a fold-away sofa bed. When Harry asked about when his mum lived there, Ninny said it was Mistress Lily's home until she married Master James, and that, once they were married, Master James and Mistress Lily used it as a guest house. She said the fireplace there was linked with the fireplace at Potter Manor until they went into hiding at Potter's cottage. "Is the fireplace still connected to the Floo network?" asked Harry. "Yes, but turned off," replied Ninny. "Can I turn it back on from here?" he asked. Ninny showed him how to turn the fireplace back on, re-establishing the connection to the Floo network. Looking around, he saw a small ornamental box in the mantelpiece. Looking inside, he found a small supply of Floo powder. Looking at the elf, he asked, "The Floo address for here is Lily's pad?" "Yes, Master Harry," she replied. "All right, then, I suppose that's it," asked Harry, looking at the others. Both Daphne and Sirius nodded. "Then let us away to Greengrass Estate," he said, offering the container to Daphne first. Daphne flewed away first, then Sirius. Finally Harry after he returned the box to the mantelpiece and bid Ninny to take care of herself. Wanting to get unsealing Potter Manor out of the way, Harry convinced the Greengrasses to let him go there the next morning. Cygnus showed him the ward ledger for Greengrass Estate and told him how a similar ledger would be kept at Potter Manor. He would have to get the elves to show him the ledger and taught him how to add and remove the names of those who were permitted through the substantial wards on the property. Harry would need to go, alone first. Add the names of those who he wanted to allow through, reconnect the Floon and then tell everyone else when he was done. Harry dropped into a pocket quill and ink in case he needed it for the ward ledger in the manor. Because of the wards at Greengrass Estate, he had to walk to the front gates of the property and leave the warded area before he was free to use his ring portkey. Daphne escorted him out. Once outside the gates, Daphne told him he was far enough away to be beyond the wards. After a quick hug and kiss between them, he firmly pressed on his ring and called Potter Manor. He disappeared in a swirl. After the merry-go-round feeling of Port King ended, Harry barely staggered when he landed in an office in a large home. A moment later, Petey popped in. The little elf bowed and said, "Welcome home, Master Harry." "Potter Manor, right?" he asked the elf. "Yes, Master Harry," replied the elf. "This is the Master's study in Potter Manor." "Well, thank Merlin for that," he said. "Now, I believe there's a ward book for the manor wards I need to have a look at and adjust." "Yes, Master Harry," replied the elf. He walked over to the room's fireplace and indicated an indentation in the filigree work of the surround. "You need to press the house ring into there, Master." Harry walked over and could see just what the little elf was pointing to. He made a fist with his right hand and the ring in front, lined it up and pressed it into the indentation. A few moments later, Harry felt the magics of the ring signify something, and he heard a click. He pulled the ring away, and a section of the surround popped open. Pulling on it, he noticed it was like a drawer. He pulled it right out, and inside, he found a leather-bound folio with a sealed bottle of ink and a gorgeous quill resting atop it. Lifting all 3 items out, he carried them over to the desk and placed them on the blotter. He took seat in what was now his chair and pulled himself up to the desk. Looking down at the folio, he again saw the impression of the house ring. He pressed it into the impression, and there was a light flash before the edge of the folio book seemed to come free. Opening the book, he could see names that had clearly started when the manor was first built, and proceeding forward chronologically from there, he flipped through the pages until he came to the last entries and started to scan backwards, looking for names that were still recognized as having access to the property. One of the last entries was Harry James Potter. Scanning backwards for names not yet crossed out, he also found Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, Daphne Ophelia Greengrass, Alice Green Longbottom, Francis Andrew Longbottom, Isabel Mary Greengrass, Cygnus George Greengrass, Lily Evans Potter, Sirius Orion Black, and James Charles Potter. Names that were crossed out that he recognized included Amelia Susan Bones, Susan Charity Bones, Augusta Reeves Longbottom, Remus John Lupin, Peter Andrew Pettigrew, Minerva Hetty McGonagall, Phileas Flitwick, and Rubeus Jeremy Hagrid. Snapping himself out of his broody mood, Harry noticed he only needed to add Astoria May Greengrass to the list to have the Greengrass estate household able to enter the manor. However, he used the opportunity to add Tracy Ann Davis, Neville Francis Longbottom, Susan Charity Bones, Hannah Mary Abbott, and Hermione June Granger. Thinking a bit, he also returned Remus John Lupin, Amelia Susan Bones, and Augusta Reeves Longbottom to the list. Then he removed only one name, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, and he was quite pleased with himself when he did so. I wonder if that's how Dumbledore came into possession of those books the goblins told me about, he thought. Blowing on the ink to make sure it was dried, he softly closed the ledger. Another light flash made the book seem to compress itself together a little as the pages all locked together. He then carried the items back to the hidden drawer and carefully pushed it closed. With a click, it almost seemed to disappear. Petey was still waiting for him, so he asked the elf, "Okay, Petey, what do I need to do to activate the fireplace back onto the Floo network?" The little elf told Harry that the fireplace wasn't connected to the Floo network. However, he led Harry from the office and through to the parlor where a fireplace similar in size to the one at Greengrass Estate was found. In there, Petey led him through the steps to reconnect that fireplace to the network. Once it was done, Harry found a flip-top wooden box on the mantel with Fleur powder. He looked to the elf and said, "I'll be back soon with some guests." "Fare thee well, Master Harry," replied the elf with a bow. "Thank you, Petey." Harry tossed in the Floo powder, called Greengrass Estate, and stepped into the flames. "Yildy, and you're sure you entered the names in the ward ledger correctly?" asked Cygnus. "Cygnus," said Harry. "I did it correctly and even had Petey watch me do it. If I had done anything wrong, he would have let me know. The ward permissions have been correctly set. Don't worry." Once everyone was organized who would be coming, which, as this was a big and exciting thing, meant everybody. Harry was first through the floor back to Potter Manor. When he arrived, Petey quickly popped in, and when Harry said the rest of his party was right behind him, Petey called the other 3 British-based Potter elves, including Ninny. Next through was Cygnus, then Sirius, Daphne, Tori, and finally Isabel. Harry grinned and, looking at Cygnus, said, "See, everyone's safe." Cygnus just cocked a wry grin back. Turning to look at the elves, Harry said, "Petey, how about a tour? I know Cygnus, Isabel, and Sirius have been here before, but it's been a while." A little excited, Petey said, "Petey is happy to show everyone Potter Manor." Not just content with showing everyone the rooms of the manor, Petey also talked about the history of the property. and showed them everything except, as Harry came to understand later, certain features of the manor that he considered family secrets not to be shared. In the entry hall, Harry looked up in awe at the large embossed crest of House Potter that was affixed to the wall between the twin curved staircases that led up each side. It was something he missed seeing when he left the office to go and reactivate the flume in the large fireplace. However, it was what they found in the upstairs private family common room, or history room, that had Harry gobsmacked. Hanging on the wall was a large red velvet tapestry with a huge family tree embroidered in gold thread and other colors. Having taken his elbow almost from the moment she stepped out of the fireplace, Daphne pointed towards the bottom left of it and whispered, "Look, Harry, there's us." Looking towards where she indicated, Harry could indeed see his full name embossed in gold thread. And, right alongside it, and joined with a dotted line, was Daphne Ophelia Greengrass. Sirius moved in closer and indicated Harry's paternal grandparents. "Here's how you're most directly related to me, Harry. Charles Emmett Potter married Doria Hestia Black. Doria's oldest brother was my maternal grandfather. It's how I'm able to name you as the heir presumptive of House Black, which I've formally done, by the way." Harry nodded, a little too choked up to talk. Cygnus stepped forward and indicated another name before indicating another joined by marriage alongside. "That's your great-great-aunt who married my great-grandfather." "I'm happy to see Daphne's name already there," said Harry in a soft voice. "As am I, Harry," said Cygnus, giving him a one-armed hug. "It is yet another confirmation magic has accepted the status of the betrothal contract and Daphne's future as the next Lady Potter." Looking up towards the top of the tapestry, Harry saw another name that surprised him. Pointing to it, he asked, "Dagworth Granger?" Everyone else looked at it and knew what Harry was wondering about. "Could be," mused Cygnus. "It's a line believed to have died out generations ago," said Sirius, also wondering. "An inheritance test would let us know one way or the other," said Cygnus. "We could ask the Grangers if they're willing for Hermione to undergo the test," said Harry. "It wouldn't hurt," said Isabel. "There's no downside to such a test, except for the initial pain of the pricking to collect the blood, and that soon passed." Nodding, Cygnus said, "All right, it's something to consider." From the private rooms of the family of the head of house, they looked through the 7 guest rooms with their private in-suits before heading back downstairs. Stepping outside, Harry saw just how big Potter Manor really was. The main building was 2 full stories tall, plus a large walk-through windowed attic. The walls were painted a brilliant white with the window frames and doors in gloss black. The roof was shingled black with the window frames in gloss white. While it was midwinter and snow covered everything, it was easy to see how the gardens would be immaculately groomed in summer with clearly delineated beds. Out the back they found a Quidditch pitch with a single set of tribunes, stands for spectators, sitting opposite of where they were standing. Rizzy met them and took them to see the small triplet of greenhouses set off to one side. Inside, the benches and hanging spaces were clean and clear. Only one greenhouse was operational, and that was being used to grow vegetables, fruits, and herbs at one end. The stables were on the other side of the area to the rear of the manor house, and there was a set of corrals fenced in white railings. Like the manor proper, the stables were painted in brilliant white with black trimmed windows and doors. However, the stables were unoccupied as there were currently no pets kept on the property. Trudging back inside before they got too cold, they were led to the informal dining room by Callie, who sat them down with hot chocolate beverages each. Master and mistress and guests should have worn warm winter cloaks before going outside. "Yous catch cold," the little elf scolded them. Harry chuckled and said, "Yes, Callie, thank you for reminding us. We didn't think to bring them when we decided to visit. Next time, we shall remember." As they were finishing their cacos, Isabel asked, "Have you seen everything you want to see, Harry?" Thinking, Harry replied, "I've just had a thought. I think I need to go into the library for a minute to have a look." "Well, shall we?" asked Cygnus. Nodding, Harry led the others back to the library. They'd only had a bit of a look earlier. Stepping into the library, Harry called Petey. "Yes, Master Harry?" the little elf asked. After Master James and Mistress Lily left, did Albus Dumbledore come back here? asked Harry. "Yes, Master Harry. replied the elf. He said Master James said he could borrow some books from the library here. With a snort, Harry said to the others, I thought so. His name was still in the permissions list to come through the wards. I've now removed it. Turning to the elf again, he asked, and how many books did he take and not return? He took 15 books and returned none, Master Harry, the elf replied. With a snort of his own, Cygnus muttered, thieving old wanker. Still to the elf, Harry asked, and how many books did he borrow before James and Lily left and not returned at all? 3, Master Harry. With a grim look, Harry said to the elf, then I want you to find those 18 books and bring them back to the library. I also want a list of just what books he took. Is there anything else he took from any Potter property and has not returned? He has taken nothing else, Master Potter, replied Petey. Musing for a bit, Harry asked, is there any property belonging to Albus Dumbledore still here, or at any other Potter property? No, Master Harry. Then thank you, Petey, said Harry. The elf popped away. I think that's it then, said Harry. Sirius was grumbling as they headed back to the fireplace. And to think I trusted that old man. After they all flew back to Greengrass Estate, Harry said, it's not as if we can actually see him charged with taking the books. After all, he can always say he only borrowed them and that my father gave him permission to hold on to them for a while. I'm just annoyed he actually did it. After all, according to this list, some of those books were extremely rare, out of print and priceless. Well, the house elves will get them back soon enough, said Cygnus. I just wish I could be there when he realizes they've gone. I've no doubt he will want to talk to me about them, and the other items the goblins will be recovering when we get back to Hogwarts, said Harry. I imagine he's going to be quite upset with me. Daphne snickered and said in an impersonating voice, Ah, Harry, my boy, I'm so disappointed in you. Your father would be so disappointed in you, too. Those books were entrusted into my care by your father, and it's important I have them. It's for the greater good. Sirius burst into laughter first, closely followed by Harry and Cygnus. Isabel just smirked, while Astoria clearly didn't know what her sister was getting at, but still thought she sounded funny. We're a jury. Yes. A couple of days later, Cygnus received a flukeel from Dumbledore. Ah, Cygnus, said Dumbledore, I wonder if I may step through concerning a matter of utmost importance. And what matter would be the utmost of importance on New Year's Eve, Albus? Asked Cygnus. Something best not discussed via flu, I'm afraid, replied Dumbledore. I shall only be a few moments. I'm afraid I'm going to need more than just that, Albus, replied Cygnus. Cygnus watched as the expression on Dumbledore's face turned hard for a moment before the old man seemed to gather himself. He said, It is a most delicate matter concerning your family business. I'm sure you won't want it spoken of via this medium. Oh, I'm sure I'll weather it just fine, Albus, replied Cygnus in a magnanimous voice. Please say what you need to. My family is looking forward to a festive evening, and preparations must be made. Dumbledore's expression turned hard again before he said, I wish to speak with you about young Harry, and wish not to speak of such matters via the flu. If you don't trust the flu, send me an owl, Albus, said Cygnus. This is a matter I wish to speak with you in person, Cygnus. The old man sighed. Can you not spare me a few moments, old friend? Of course, Albus, said Cygnus, but in order not to disturb my family's preparations for this evening, it'd be best if I come through to you. Harry and Daphne, who were out of sight of the fireplace but in sight of Cygnus, were trying their best not to laugh out loud at the attempts of Dumbledore to get inside the Greengrass wards. With another big overdone sigh, Dumbledore said, Alas, that would not be possible. I shall try at a time when you are not so busy. Before Cygnus could respond, Dumbledore pulled his face out of the fire, and the green of an active flu-call disappeared. Persistent, isn't he? He smirked at the two. I believe he's finally realized I've not spent Christmas with my biological aunt, said Harry. I was wondering when he'd figure it out. And why would he think you would? Asked Cygnus. Harry grinned and said, Pensive time. Cygnus chuckled and said, I take it I'm going to find this entertaining. Oh, yes, said Daphne. Well, come on then, he said, heading for his office. After viewing the memory, Cygnus came out and said he assumed Exactly, said Harry. We've decided to use his own trickery of words back at him. We've noticed he often says something that is inherently true, however, is easily perceived as meaning something else entirely. He did that a lot during his trial. He deliberately uses words and a sentence structure that leads you to a false conclusion. So, when you said you'd be spending Christmas with your family, you knew he would assume you meant your aunt, said Cygnus. But what about when he specifically said he was surprised you had forgiven your aunt enough to spend time over Christmas with her? He made a statement. He didn't ask a question. You'll notice he rarely actually asks a question, just makes a statement and waits for you to respond, said Harry. I knew it was a falsehood, of course, but it's not necessarily my place to correct him when he makes such. It's the same thing he does. Now, if he had asked if I had meant my biological aunt's place when I said my family, then I would have been obliged to tell him so. Alas, he didn't. Cygnus chuckled and said it must really get under his skin. I hope it does, said Harry. That's why we've been practicing his mannerisms, as well as his manner of speech. And he can't tell us off, or otherwise punish us for it, because then he'd have to admit that what he was doing was inherently wrong. I cannot see him doing that. Thinking a bit, he continued, You're probably going to have to let him through at some time. However, make him make an appointment. Then Daphne and I will make plans to be somewhere else, at the time of the appointment. You've not been to Tracy's place yet, have you? Asked Daphne of Harry. Shaking his head with a grin, he replied, No, I've been to Neville's and Susan's, but not Tracy's, Hannah's or Hermione's. Well, she said, we'll have to visit her soon, won't we? Harry laughed and said, Of course, dear. It would be quite rude not to. And your eyes. While they had a great night staying up until after midnight to welcome the new year, Harry was roused from bed at the godforsaken time of 9:00 a.m. the next morning by Cygnus. Worriedly, Harry asked, What's going on? I've just had a chat with Dumbledore via Flo again, he said. He's coming over in an hour. Apparently his delicate matter of utmost importance cannot wait until a more respectable time. Grumbling about meddling old fools, Harry quickly rose, showered, toileted, and dressed in about 20 minutes. He felt he'd managed to time it perfectly when he was joined by Daphne coming out of her own room, also not happy about the time. I doubt very much Tracy will be up at this time, she said by way of good morning. Then we shall have to do something else, said Harry. When they made their way downstairs, Cygnus was waiting for them. Sorry, kids, he said. I couldn't get hold of the Davises either. Harry turned to Daphne and asked, How do you feel about a second visit to Lily's pad? We can watch what's going on in the alley. With a frown of annoyance, she replied, I hope Ninny's up to preparing a breakfast for us. I'm sure she'll manage, soothed Harry. All right, she sighed, but I'm still getting you over to Tracy's place before we have to return to Hogwarts on the 5th. And I look forward to it, he said. Harry and Daphne approached the fireplace and said to Cygnus, We'll be at Lily's pad above Scribulus's, then again we might not, and smirked. Cygnus nodded and said, This should take no more than an hour, so I'll see you in about 2, all right? 2 hours, it is, said Harry. A pinch of tossed flu powder and a call of Lily's pad each, and Harry and Daphne were gone. Botam! Yes! Cygnus thought it was lucky Harry and Daphne left when they did as Dumbledore flew, called not 5 minutes after they'd left. Good morning again, Cygnus, said the old man. I find I have to move my scheduling up a bit this morning. I hope you're able to see me now. Cheeky bugger, thought Cygnus. I bet you have nothing organized for after this other than running around trying to find Harry. Very well, Albus, said Cygnus. The sooner you've been and gone, the sooner I can get to my breakfast. I find myself quite cranky in the morning until I've broken my fast. Take that as you will, old man, he thought. Not a few moments later, Dumbledore stepped through. Thank you for taking the time to see me, Cygnus, said Dumbledore. Shall we head through to your office? In here will do fine, Albus, replied Cygnus, taking a seat in one of the armchairs, before he indicated the seat opposite. Oh, yes, very well, said the old man, slightly aback. I would have thought somewhere more private would have been better. The rest of the household is asleep, Albus, said Cygnus. We'll not be bothered. It was, after all, a late night last night. Now, what do you want? Ah, replied Dumbledore. Straight to it, then. Taking a page from Harry and Daphne's way of dealing with the headmaster, Cygnus didn't say a word. Finally sitting down, Dumbledore said, "I have been in a bit of a panic these past few days. Mr. Potter did not arrive safely at his maternal aunt's for the holidays." Again, Cygnus didn't say a word. "Yes, well, stuttered the old man. "I wondered if you might know where young Harry might be." And yet again, Cygnus didn't say a word. The man had still not asked a question of him yet. As he watched the expressions war across the old man's face, he thought, Daphne and Harry are right. It really throws him off his game. Deciding to throw the old man a bone, Cygnus asked, "Are you actually asking me if I know where young Mr. Potter is at the moment, Albus?" "Well, yes, I guess that's what I'm asking." "Yes," replied Dumbledore. "Then no, Albus," said Cygnus. "Well done, Harry," he thought. "Ah, I see," said Dumbledore. "It is most imperative I find him." "Albus," said Cygnus, showing he was getting annoyed, "you informed me you needed to speak with me concerning a, as you put it, matter of utmost importance, and that it was delicate. I fail to see how Mr. Potter's whereabouts are either of those, or are any of your concern. Now, please get to the reason for this most urgent meeting, so I may get on with my day." "Well, I had expected Mr. Potter to be here," tried the old man. "He's not here," interrupted Cygnus. "Now, again, what is this delicate matter of utmost importance relating to my family business you wanted to speak to me about?" "Well, as the matter relates to Mr. Potter, I was hoping to also speak with him about it," replied Dumbledore. "Then perhaps if you had been more forthcoming with that information, Albus, I might have been able to arrange a time with Mr. Potter when he would be here," said an irritated Lord Greengrass. "However, it appears you have wasted both your own time and mine. I suggest in future you be clear in what it is you want in advance of any meeting with me instead of leaving it to chance. Now, since he isn't here and our houses are now in open alliance, I give you my word I will pass on anything and all of what it is you wish to speak with him about." "Yes, it appears I have caught you at a bad time," said Dumbledore, quickly rising to his feet. "I had best be on my way. Thank you for your time." With that, Dumbledore quickly strode the few steps to the fireplace, drawing a small container of flue powder out of his robes as he moved. With a dash of powder and a call of "Headmaster's office, Hogwarts," he was on his way. While muttering, "Stupid old man," Cygnus reached behind the cushion of the chair on which he sat and drew out to sit on his lap the ward ledger. He quickly opened it to the right page and, drawing a self-inking quill from his robes, crossed out the name Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore before blowing on it to dry the ink and closing it again. With the ledger tucked under his arm, he stood and took a couple of steps before he frowned and turned back. Drawing his own wand, he waved it about with a few muttered incantations. Getting no response to his casting, he mentally shrugged and muttered, "I wouldn't have put it past you, you old fool." "And you try to say it." Over at Lily's pad, Harry and Daphne were enjoying a wonderful English breakfast quickly prepared by Ninny. Both Harry and Daphne apologized to the lovely little elf for not giving her advance notice and told her to take her time preparing breakfast. They had thought to have a small table moved out onto the balcony so they could sit at it while enjoying their breakfast, but quickly decided it was too cold outside. Instead, they were sitting at the dining table in the dining nook. Harry had managed to disappear down into the alley for a few minutes while they were waiting for breakfast and picked up a copy of the Daily Prophet and Teen Witch Weekly. Both preteens now sat in companionable silence while reading their respective publications. Once he'd finished breaking his fast, Harry could see that Daphne was now sitting back drinking from a teacup with one hand while holding her magazine with the other. Picking up his own teacup, Harry mimicked her. "Anything interesting in yours, Daph?" he quietly asked. "A bit of information on the fashions at the Yule Ball," she said. "Who wore what, and how it looked on them. Lord Mulciber made an ass of himself, but that's not so unusual. The spring line of fashion will be in the stores soon. Again, they always announce that right after Christmas. Oh, there's a new designer coming to work at Twilfit and Tattings from Europe. I'll have to see if I can get Mum to make an appointment for me early this coming summer. And there's a new product range of beauty products at Madame Primellel's. They've managed to contract with a renowned potions mistress in Europe. Earth-shaking, I'm sure, said Harry. Daphne replied, "Don't be snarky, Harry James. These are important matters to us girls." "I apologize, my lady," said Harry. "You are, as always, correct." Daphne didn't even bother to respond. "On to the other matters within Wizarding Britain," said Harry. "The Daily Prophet have managed to steal a journalist from the Witch Weekly, a woman named Rita Skeeter. That was the name of the woman reporter Mr. Wordsworth mentioned at Sirius's trial. He made her seem like a gossip columnist who writes untruths." "She is," said Daphne. "She wrote a horrid piece about our betrothal back in September." With a frown, Harry looked Daphne in the eye and asked, "Why am I only hearing of this now?" "Because you were in the hospital and no one wanted to see you get upset again," she calmly replied. "You would have, and you know it." "So," he muttered, "we plan on staying away from her, and asking our friends to do the same." Daphne nodded and said, "Good idea." Turning back to the paper, Harry said, "There's an article that looks like it was written by the minister himself. It says he worked over Christmas demonstrating he's such a hard worker for the people of magical Britain, blah, blah, blah. Ooh, there's a new broom company just starting out called Bolt Brooms. They hope to have a prototype out by Christmas 1992. They're aiming for the broom that will be recognized as a true Quidditch player's broom. I wonder if I can get in on that and provide some startup capital." "You'd likely be throwing away gold," she replied. "There's already Nimbus, Clinsweep and Comet in Britain alone, and they all released new broom models this year. The Nimbus 2000, the Clinsweep 7 and the Comet 260. They have only a very tiny chance of getting anything worthwhile to market." With a sigh, Harry said, "You're right, but it would be just the best thing to be part of that." After breakfast, both kids decided they had plenty of time to kill, so went down to the bank. Harry was quickly through to see Bloodfang, who confirmed for Harry that his property had been recovered from Dumbledore. He also informed Harry that a Potter elf had been by and collected the books to return them to the Potter library. "Yes, I should have thought to warn you of that," he said. "I apologize, I did not." Soon after his meeting, he and Daphne went down to his vaults. Harry was shown the two magical artifacts that were recovered, the cloak and the pensieve. As the cloak was light enough and able to be folded into a very small wad, Harry folded it up and pocketed it to take back with them. Looking at the pensieve, he could see it still contained memories, so he decided he'd get Bloodfang to collect the memories out of the pensieve and send them to him. If Dumbledore was a good boy, he'd return them early, but if he became just as much a nuisance as the first term, he'd delay their return and use Dumbledore's own excuses against him. Together, the kids left the bank. Harry asked if Daphne needed anything before they returned to Lily's pad. As she didn't, they just went straight back to the apartment. With a quick time charm, Harry realized it was time to return to Greengrass Estate. "I know it sounds trite, but told you so," said Harry with a grin. As soon as they returned to Greengrass Estate, they found the others all in the informal dining room, except for Sirius. Harry assumed he was still abed. Cygnus told them both about how Dumbledore arrived only 5 minutes after they'd left, how he was overtly hinting that he was really there to see Harry, and how Cygnus also didn't respond to his questions, couched as passive statements. When he mentioned Dumbledore tried to push more overtly to speak to Harry, he mentioned how he pushed back flatly, stating Harry wasn't there and that he should have mentioned he wanted to speak to Harry in the first place, and then how Dumbledore left in a right huff. "All up, the meeting only took about 5 minutes, said Cygnus. "I'm surprised he didn't try to invite himself for breakfast so he could remain here and wait for my return," said Harry. "He couldn't, because that would then put the lie to him, saying he had to move the meeting up because of other commitments," said Cygnus. "He painted himself into a corner with that one." "Only?" Starting on the 2nd of January, Harry taught Cygnus and Isabel how to pull magic into themselves, and used the same breathing-in example to effect them accomplishing it. Just as with the 7, he told them they needed to practice it, and asked them not to go sharing it around. He left on his own with Sirius that afternoon for some boys' time at Black House in London. Sirius made sure Harry was cleared through the wards before coming to collect him, so Harry was able to flew directly to the house in the cul-de-sac of Grimmauld Place. When he entered, he could see the room they were in was actually still quite shabby. However, he was invited to have a look through some of the other rooms. Seeing them, he realized the room in which he arrived was actually quite presentable in comparison. Sirius then took him down to the kitchen, where he was introduced to Remus Lupin. When Harry shook the man's hand and said, "Hello, Moony," the two adults were taken aback. "Harry," asked Remus, "who told you that name?" Harry glanced at Sirius and said, "Thank you for not telling even him." Harry then turned back to the other man and said, "I heard Dad call you that many years ago." Seeing the frown on Remus's face, Harry knew the man thought he was being pranked. With a sigh, he asked, "What do you understand about an eidetic memory, Moony?" "Perfect recall, right?" replied Moony. "Yes," replied Harry with a nod. "Perfect recall of everything: sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. I have an eidetic memory enhanced by a full mindscape." Remus sat back in the kitchen chair he was first sitting in. His face held an expression of surprise and awe, looking back at Harry. "Everything?" he asked. "Everything," replied Harry. "So you know I'm a werewolf," said Remus. "Yep. And it doesn't bother you?" "Nope," replied Harry. "I remember it was Dad who kept saying it was a furry little problem. I know it as a disease that afflicts you most overtly around the full moon. I also know there was a full moon on the 21st of last month, and that it was going to take you quite a few days to get over the forced transformation. And that's why I didn't see you. However, you have no reason to fear I would reject you, because I won't. I know you were one of my parents' closest friends and an honorary uncle to me, and I know you would spend time often at Potter Manor." "Told you," said Sirius from behind Harry. Remus first looked up at his friend before looking down at the table and sighing. I'm just used to people turning away from me in disgust when they find out," he said. "The only time I'll ever look at you in disgust is if you put yourself down in front of me one too many times," said Harry. "I don't like people doing that." Now, turning around to look at his godfather, Harry said, "As for you, I can see you really need the help of the Potter elves in here, so don't be bashful in calling on them, all right?" "All right, Harry," replied Sirius. "I will." "Thank you," said Harry. "Now I know this is supposed to be Harry and his godfather getting to know each other time, but would you like to learn how I make my magic flare as I promised I would the day I arrived back at Greengrass Estate for Christmas holidays?" "Yeah, actually," said Sirius. "Flare your magic?" asked Remus. "Mm-hmm," replied Harry. "Sirius has already seen me do it, and I promised I'd teach him. If you'd like to watch it, it'll only take a few minutes. Then I'll work with you." Sirius came around and eagerly sat at the table with Harry and Remus. "All right," he said. "How do we begin?" Then Harry began to teach the trick using the now tried and true method. It only took about 10 minutes for Sirius to get it. And the first time Sirius got his magic to significantly flare, Remus's eyes widened and his jaw dropped open in shock. After Sirius tried for the third time accomplishing it with his eyes open, Harry told him to stop before he overdid it. "Damn," said Remus, once he got his voice back. "That's what I said," said Sirius in glee. "And you can do that, cub?" asked Remus of Harry. "Yes," replied Harry, "and I can now do it more powerfully and hold it for longer. Plus, I've also been practicing casting spells while doing it, and I'm finding my magic much stronger as a result." "Damn," said Remus again. "I know you closely watched what I was doing with Sirius, but do you want me to help you through it?" asked Harry. Thinking a bit, Remus said, "Let me see if I can get the basics of it first. If I struggle, then you can guide me, all right?" "All right," replied Harry with a nod. Harry and Sirius then watched Remus concentrate for a bit. They then watched as he took in a few deep breaths. Then, on the third breath, they noticed his magic start to leak. Another breath, and he did it again, stronger. In less time than with Sirius, Remus was sitting with his eyes open and glowing but unfocused, and magic was swirling around him in long surges. "Don't hold it too long," Moony warned Harry. "Let it out completely now, and you'll see just how tired you are." Both then watched as Moony settled down again and the glow in his eyes faded away. A few seconds later, and he looked like he wanted to slump forward onto the tabletop. "Damn," he said for the third time. Now both of you need to set aside a part of your day, each day, to practice it, holding it for longer and longer each time," said Harry. "Then once you can hold it for at least 3 minutes, you might want to try spellcasting while doing it. But be careful, you'll find your casts to be somewhat overpowered when you do." Sirius said, "All right, I feel rested a bit now and nowhere near as tired as I did before you started teaching Moony. I want to see how fast I can start doing it without having to go through that whole breathing training first." With a nod, Harry said, "Go for it." Sirius's men took on a look of concentration for a few moments before he rapidly began effusing magic and had glowing eyes. He held it for about 15 seconds and then let it relax out of him. He too almost slumped forward onto the table. "Merlin, that takes it out of you," he said. "Magic is like a muscle," said Harry. "It needs to be exercised, so you're going to need to practice it every day. You'll soon get up to speed with it." Looking around a little, Harry asked, "Is there anything to drink here?" "Oh," said Sirius. "Not the very good host, am I? Creature?" An elderly and ugly house elf appeared and started muttering, "What does the filthy blood traitor—" "Enough," said Sirius. "Creature, 3 butterbeers, please." The elf popped away and returned a few moments later with the required 3 beverages. Harry first had a butterbeer when he was living in the alley. He was disappointed to learn they didn't have it at Hogwarts. However, he was assured it could be purchased in Hogsmeade and brought back to the castle if he could find a 3rd-year-old up who would be willing to purchase it for him. Sirius quickly banished the caps off the bottles, and the 3 wizards spent the time drinking them, reminiscing about Harry's parents. "Oi, Cyrax," says Harry. On the day of return to Hogwarts, Sunday the 5th January, the Greengrass household was up early and ready in plenty of time. Daphne and Harry had packed ready the previous night, with Daphne bringing in a set of Hogwarts robes to put in Harry's trunk on top of his things. Harry sent Hedwig back to Hogwarts as soon as she rested after delivering him his morning's daily profit. He had her things packed away soon afterwards. Going to Daphne's room, he knocked and was bid enter. Inside, Daphne was clearly doing a final check before closing and locking her trunk. Glancing over at it and seeing how overfull it was, he asked, "How on earth do you intend to close that?" "It'll close," she half snarked. "Oh, I'm sure it will," he calmly replied, "but if you have anything fragile in there, I'm worried you're going to break it." "It'll be fine," she said. She packed one last item of civilian garb on top and muttered, "That'll do it," and closed the lid. Though it didn't quite close all the way down, she sat down heavily on the lid and managed to get the catch to lock. "See," she said, indicating the trunk. "I told you it'd close." Harry just laughed in response. "Do you want me to levitate it down to the parlor for you?" "Of course," she said. "That's one of the reasons I keep you around for, is it not?" Releasing his wand from the holster, Harry didn't bother to reply. He just levitated the trunk and led it down to sit on top of his own next to the fireplace. Daphne followed to make sure he didn't drop it. "Well," she said, "now that's done, I want to make sure we arrive at the station in plenty of time to meet up with the others." Azkaban. The prison was built on the island that was originally inhabited by the dark wizard Ares, who used it to lure and torture Muggle sailors. Arriving at the Muggle side of Platform 9 Harster at just after 10:30 a.m., Harry was happy to see the Grangers had only just arrived before them. "Wendell, Monica, Hermione," he called in greeting. The Grangers immediately spun about, and Monica enveloped him in a quick hug. He shook hands with Wendell and immediately gave Hermione a hug before she could launch herself at him for one of her grapple hugs. Harry and Daphne were escorted to the station by Isabel and Tori. Cygnus and Sirius were in last-minute preparations for a closely approaching Wizengamot session and were unable to attend. Remus begged off, saying he still wasn't comfortable being around too many witches and wizards in one place, such as the platform. The Grangers sent their owl to Cygnus on the 2nd January, stating they would be honored to become protectees of House Greengrass. And only yesterday evening, while they were wearing brand-new everyday wizarding robes, did Cygnus perform the ritual. Both were amazed how the crest of House Greengrass suddenly appeared on their left shoulders. Today they were all wearing normal Muggle attire, as were many wizarding families, such as the Greengrasses. I was just about to go through to the platform, said Hermione. Then we shall go through together, said Harry. After spending a few minutes with the Granger parents, the Greengrass party headed through the barrier onto the platform. Carefully moving through the crowds, Harry and Daphne with Hermione in tow meandered down the length of the platform, looking for their friends. Finding none of them, he offered to get the trunks on board into a spare compartment. The girls glanced at each other and smiled before turning back. Daphne said, "That would be nice, Harry." Picking up his own with a levitation charm, Harry led it onto the train and started searching for a free cabin. He found one in the last carriage. Levitating his trunk up, he stored it in the overhead racks and exited the train to grab the other two. Quickly, he had Hermione's trunk on top of Daphne's and levitated both onto the train. So concentrating was he didn't notice the looks of surprise he was getting from those nearby. Less than a minute later, he had both Daphne's and Hermione's trunks alongside his own in the racks in their compartment. For safety, he pulled the door shut behind him and locked it. Within the next 10 minutes, he greeted and assisted with their trunks Susan, Hannah, and Tracy. Neville insisted on getting his own trunk on board, but accepted Harry's help in getting it into the overheads. He was only able to spend a few minutes greeting Aunt Amelia and Gran before the 7 had to board. The 5-minute whistle had sounded a little while ago. When they arrived at Hogsmeade Station about 7 hours later, Harry was pleased they wouldn't be riding the little boats to the castle. This time, when he asked about it, he was told it only occurred for the first trip to give the new first years a unique view of the castle. Betrothed. As soon as they disembarked the carriages in front of the front door of the castle, they were stopped by Professor Snape. The potions master looked at Harry and said, "The headmaster wants to see you immediately before the feast." With a sigh, Harry said, "Very well, I shall collect Professor Flitwick and we shall be there momentarily." The professor stared at him and almost snarled. "When the headmaster says immediately, he means precisely that, Mr. Potter. And when the school charter states no student shall be summoned to such a meeting without being accompanied when requested by their head of house, it means precisely that, Professor Snape," replied Harry. The professor glared back for a moment before he spun about with a swirl of his robes and stalked back inside. Harry turned to Daphne and asked, "Have your glasses with you?" "Always," she replied with a knowing smile. With Daphne on his arm, Harry walked into the castle and into the great hall. As he expected, Professor Flitwick was already there. Walking up to the head table, he looked at the small professor and said, "I've just been given a message by Professor Snape. The headmaster wishes to see me before the feast." The professor frowned and said, "Such messages should come through me, Mr. Potter, as your head of house." "Nevertheless, Professor," said Harry, "that is what happened." With a sigh, the professor hopped down off his chair and indicated for the two to follow him. They left through the teacher's entrance, as it was the quickest path to the headmaster's office. "I'd say you..." Walking up the hallway towards the gargoyle, Harry said, "I'm beginning to believe I need to request quarters in this part of the castle, what with the number of times I keep being summoned here." "And I would seek quarters right alongside," said Daphne. "I don't think I can trust you not to get into trouble without my calming influence near you." As they entered the office, Dumbledore said, "I believe I told Professor Snape I wanted to speak with you immediately upon your arrival, Mr. Potter. And I gathered that Professor Snape was in error by telling me precisely that." "Headmaster," replied Harry, "after all, it would be a breach of the school charter for you to do something so foolish. And I doubt you'd risk your tenure here to do such a thing." With a long last look, Dumbledore looked away and down to the chair before his desk. With a swish of his wand, he reconfigured it into a wide, low couch and bade them to sit. "Now, Mr. Potter, the reason I wanted to speak with you so urgently is because I was worried about you," he said with his concerned grandfatherly visage firmly in place. "You informed me you were going to spend Christmas with your Aunt Petunia, and I was disappointed." "Sorry, Headmaster," interrupted Harry, "but I did no such thing." Almost glaring at him, Dumbledore said, "I distinctly remember a conversation I had with you before the holidays, where you told me you were going to do precisely that." "No, Headmaster," said Harry. "I informed you I would be spending the holidays with my family, and I did precisely that. I do not consider my Aunt Petunia or her brood as family." The headmaster was doing a poor job of not showing his anger. "It is important you spend time in the home of your aunt, Mr. Potter," he said. "The blood wards there need recharging, and that can only happen with your presence within the house." "Why?" asked Harry in not a little anger himself. "The wards are based on the blood that courses through your and your aunt's veins, Mr. Potter," explained Dumbledore in anger. "As long as you call your aunt's home your own, the protections afforded you by those wards are the strongest they can be." Harry scoffed and said, "Privet Drive was never my home, headmaster." Suddenly, one of Dumbledore's little wheezing trinkets suddenly gave a cough, trembled slightly, and then sparked with a flash and expulsion of black smoke. "What on earth was that?" exclaimed Harry. "That, as you put it," said Dumbledore in an angry but disappointed voice, "was the blood wards on Privet Drive collapsing." "You had a monitor in place?" asked Daphne in shock. "Who gave you permission to do that?" "I set the wards in place, Miss Greengrass," he replied. "Of course I would have monitors to ensure they were working correctly." "So you warded a Muggle house," said Daphne, "with wards based on blood. Any other illegal acts you want to admit to while we're sitting here?" Dumbledore didn't respond. "So you placed up these super wards," she continued. "How did you power them? I would not have thought there'd be a suitable ley line in reach you could tap into." Dumbledore looked away, quite abashed. "You didn't," exclaimed Daphne. "Please tell me you didn't power them off a Muggle." "I am not required to answer your questions, Miss Greengrass. You forget where you are," said the headmaster. "However, as the warding actually relates only to people, there is sufficient magical energy in the area to power them," said Dumbledore. "Then why is my presence required?" asked Harry. "Because you provide, or did provide, the magical presence required to anchor it in place," he replied. "You gave magic the intent, and the intent required you to call Privet Drive your home." "Well," said Harry quite angrily, "you realize, of course, that if you had been more forthcoming with this information, then it is probable this little issue would not have arisen at all. Mind you, since the Muggle legal authorities have deemed fit that Aunt Petunia and I are not to come anywhere near each other in future, the wards would have fallen sooner or later anyway." "I pardon?" stuttered Dumbledore. "The Muggle authorities have made it a condition of Aunt Petunia's punishment that she, nor my cousin Dudley, is to come within 100 feet of me. So, there's no legal way I could have returned to Privet Drive without forcing Petunia and Dudley out of the house in the process. And, since I cannot legally force her out of her home, it is recognized as her sanctuary, then it is I who is legally required not to be within 100 feet of 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. "So you see, Albus," said Harry, leaning forward and staring back at the old man, "I am not allowed by legal fiat to return to Privet Drive until such time as my aunt and her family vacate the property for another. Even if I wanted to call Privet Drive my home, I can no longer do that." The old man sighed and sat back. "I did not know that," he quietly said. "That's because it's none of your business," snapped Harry, quite angry. "You are the headmaster of this school. What happens beyond its wards regarding any of your students is none of your concern. Stay out of my business." Sitting in silence for a while, the old man finally spoke up and said, "There are other matters I wish to speak with you about, Harry, but considering the mood at the moment, it would be best if we spoke about it at another time. Now, I do believe we are missing the feast, and I find myself rather looking forward to a delicious slice of custard tart for desserts. You may go." Not a little frustrated with the old man, Harry rose, assisted Daphne in rising, and escorted her from the office. Once outside, Harry growled out, "Stupid, meddling old fool. It's devoir." On the first Wednesday evening after they'd returned to the castle, Harry and the others were approached in the Great Hall by Draco Malfoy and his 2 bully boys. The day had been a good one, Harry felt, as Dumbledore had finally managed to find them a data teacher. That meant he would have even less interactions with the headmaster. The Dada professor was a man newly retired from the Auroral Corps who was looking for a few extra galleons to take with him into retirement. The man, Professor Bolstein, was a veteran of the 1970s war when he was a senior Auror within a ready reaction force. The professor was stern and curt with the students, but scrupulously fair. and when he taught spells, he also gave examples where such were used or could be used. Harry loved his teaching style. However, he also said he would only be there until the end of the year, when he was looking forward to retiring to a warm beach somewhere and putting cold and dreary Britain far behind himself. "Potter," sneered Malfoy. "Ah," said Harry, "Mr. Malfoy, if you've come to ask for a boon or such, I'm afraid you'll be sorely disappointed." "I want nothing from you, Potter," he sneered, but clearly angered by Harry's remark. "I've come to challenge you to a wizard's duel." "Really?" asked Harry, displaying amusement. "Then you're a lot braver than I thought. Either that, or you're inherently stupid." Now clearly furious, the blonde boy snarled, "I will not be made fun of in front of my friends, Potter. I demand satisfaction." "Why?" asked Harry. "Your right hand not giving it to you anymore? I'm actually surprised you've advanced enough through puberty that you're even capable of such an act." That elicited a number of sniggers and laughter from those who heard. Even Bully Boy number 1 cracked a bit of a small smile at that one. "I challenge you to a duel, Potter," he snarled. In a quieter voice he ominously said, "Trophy room at midnight." "Well, I accept the challenge of a wizard's duel, Mr. Malfoy," said Harry a bit louder. "However, I'm afraid holding one in the trophy room after curfew would break the rules. Therefore, we shall hold it right now." Harry rose from the table and, looking towards the head table, said, "Mr. Malfoy has just challenged me in public to a wizard's duel. I have accepted. Professor Flitwick, as a dueling master, I ask that you officiate, and we get it out of the way right now." "What?" said Malfoy, clearly startled by the development. Professor Flitwick clapped his hands a couple of times in glee and hurried around the head table to stand in front of it. "I challenged you to a wizard's duel in the trophy room, Potter," tried Malfoy. "No, you did not, Mr. Malfoy," replied Harry with a smirk. "As you did not attempt to provide conditions first, you challenged me to an open wizard's duel. Only then did you attempt to name the time and place."
"I, as the challenged, and as per the rules of wizard duels, name the time and place, and I name right here and right now."
Dumbledore stood and said, "This wizard's duel will not be open, Mr. Potter, and Mr. Malfoy, you are limited to non-lethal spells, no unforgivables, and the duel will end on international competition rules of one participant or the other being rendered unable to continue or bowing out. There shall be no second." Harry bowed to the old man and said, "As you wish, Headmaster." Meantime, Professor Flitwick had configured a dueling platform across the hall just in front of the head table and was in the process of configuring wards to protect everyone else. "Harry," whispered Daphne, standing up and stepping close to him, showing a little fear. "Are you sure about this?" Harry nodded and said, "Yeah, I've kind of been expecting something like this. If not from Malfoy, it would have been someone else, especially from Slytherin, sooner or later." Looking over at Malfoy, Harry could see the boy had turned quite white with fear. "Gentlemen," said Professor Flitwick, "the dueling platform is ready for you. Please take your places." Harry quickly mounted the platform and stood waiting at the Gryffindor end. Malfoy, clearly quite reluctantly, moved up and mounted the platform at the Slytherin end. He knew he had gotten himself into the situation. However, he could not back out without appearing weak. "Gentlemen," said Professor Flitwick clearly and firmly, "you have chosen to engage in a wizard's duel. The rules, as per international competition rules, include no unforgivables, no clearly lethal curses, and ends when either participant is unable to continue or leaves the platform. No spells may be cast once it becomes immediately apparent either participant is unable to continue or leaves the platform. Wands out. We begin when I say 3. If it does not end earlier, it ends when I say halt." Harry flicked his wand out into his hand and stood slightly leading with his right side, right foot forward, but with his weight evenly distributed between his 2 feet. Seeing both ready, Professor Flitwick called, 1, 2, 3. Harry allowed Malfoy to cast the first spell, an expulsion curse, Expulso, that would have flung Harry off the back of the platform if it hit. It was good choice as the incantation was quick and the wand movement a short flick and jab motion. However, Malfoy cast in a bit of a panic, and it didn't even require Harry to move as it clearly missed him to his left. Harry chuckled back before, almost lazily and quietly, hitting Malfoy with a disarming spell. Though given quietly and almost gently, Harry's Expelliarmus struck Malfoy's wand, clearly hurting the boy's wand hand, and causing his hawthorn wand to gently flip through the air as it passed beyond the wards and clattered to the floor next to the Hufflepuff table. "Halt!" snapped out the professor as soon as the wand left the warded area. Malfoy stood there cradling his hand and glaring murderously back at Harry. "Madam Pomfrey, if you would?" asked Dumbledore. Harry said in a denigrating tone, "Really, Mr. Malfoy, you may want to consider learning to shield before you approach me for a duel in future. It really wasn't worth the effort Professor Flitwick went through to set up the dueling platform in the first place." As Madame Pomfrey was checking Malfoy's hand, she said, Ooh, tesk, tesk. It's broken, dear boy. 2 fingers, the thumb, and one in the hand itself." With her arm wrapped around his shoulders, the Mediwitch guided Malfoy off the platform and towards the doors and said, "What an absolutely silly thing to do, challenging someone to a duel when you cannot even cast a basic shield." Honestly, Harry returned to his friends with a hug from Daphne and congratulatory praises from those nearby. It wasn't until mid the next week before Dumbledore once more summoned Harry to his office. Walking in with Daphne and Professor Flitwick, Harry said, "You know, Albus, I'm rapidly getting to the stage where I'm considering having my own personal chairs installed in here." Dumbledore just smiled and transfigured the chair before his desk into a better version of the love seat Harry had created towards the end of last year. He definitely wants something, he thought, looking askance at Daphne as he assisted her into her seat. He could see Daphne had reached the same conclusion. After he'd sat down, Dumbledore had his eyes twinkling away with his beloved grandfather expression on, and asked, "And how are you today, Harry?" "I'm all right, thank you, Albus," said Harry. "And so, I believe, is Miss Greengrass." Said Dumbledore. "I needed to talk with you concerning some items that were removed from my office and quarters here just after Christmas Day." "You think I may have stolen them, Albus?" asked Harry with an expression of shock bordering on righteous indignation. No, he quickly replied. "I believe, however, that agents acting on your behalf took them not knowing I had your father's permission to hold on to them for a while." "Aha," said Harry. "That would be the same permission I clearly and conclusively revoked soon after the beginning of the school year. You'll also recall that at the beginning of November I clearly informed you that you had until Christmas Day to return that which still remained in your possession or control, or I would make arrangements for them to be taken from you. I believe that recovery did indeed take place soon after Christmas Day. Would those be the items to which you refer?" Instead of answering, Dumbledore ignored the question and said, "I had a number of my very private memories taken when the goblins came and took my pensieve that—" "My pensieve, Albus?" interrupted Harry. "It was, after all, clearly marked with the Potter crest." There was a slight hesitation from the old man before he said, "Quite. Now, there were a number of my personal and very private memories within the pensieve when it was taken. I would like to have them back." "I see," said Harry. "Now I would like to accompany you to where the pensieve is currently stored, so I may recover my memories as soon as possible," said the old man. "I've rearranged part of my schedule so we may depart here on Saturday morning to journey to the current location of the pensieve, so I may effect recovery." "Well, you see, Albus," said Harry, adopting his own grandfatherly mien, "I'm afraid that won't be possible." He could see the old man began to bristle slightly, so held up his hand in a calming gesture. "Calm yourself, Albus. Now, the reason I said it won't be possible is you are operating under the mistaken belief the memories that were within my pensieve when I first saw it, after it was recovered, are still within the pensieve. I do not believe that is the case." Eyes no longer twinkling, Dumbledore asked, "And where would they be?" "I may have to ask the goblins," replied Harry. "I ask them to remove them." With a well-shrouded but still visible panicky look, Dumbledore leaned forward and said, "It is imperative I have my memories returned, Mr. Potter. I cannot impress upon you enough that my memories are returned to my person with all haste." "I understand, Headmaster. I have experience with being upset when that which rightfully belongs to you is denied you." Pretending to consider the request for a while, Harry said, Well, I suppose I could contact my account keeper within Gringotts and arrange matters with him. I shall organize for your memories to be returned, if of course they're still available and haven't been destroyed, and, as you put it, with all haste. Harry was having quite a bit of fun subtly watching the war of emotions flit over the old man's face as he spoke. Yes, said Harry, I shall send an owl concerning your memories this very evening, Headmaster. It would be best, Harry, if we were to head to Gringotts first thing Saturday morning, tried the old man. No, Albus, said Harry with a look of sorrow but firm voice. The goblins were quite upset with me that I did not respond to the many communications they sent to me during my sojourn in Dursleys, my little name for the Dursley residents, you understand. And it took me what felt like forever to sufficiently convince them I had nothing to do with the owl mail redirection, placed upon my own personal prison or self, nor that I knew it was even there. So I find myself quite reluctant to further harm my reborn and budding relationship with Gringotts for what is essentially a matter of importance to you, not to me. No, I cannot risk it, Albus. I shall send an owl and you may await the small delay. With a long pause before speaking, Dumbledore clearly reluctantly said, Very well, Harry. I expect to see my memories returned within the next couple of days. And I hope you will not be too disappointed if it is discovered the memories have been destroyed, replied Harry. Something we can both hope for, Harry, said the old man. Thank you for your time. You may go. While he had had his fun with the headmaster, Harry didn't want to push matters too far lest it be discovered the memories were actually up in Harry's trunk in the Ravenclaw first-year boys' dorm. On Saturday morning after breakfast, Harry sent the small bundle containing the memories in a large goblin-forged jar up to the headmaster's office via Hedwig. The note he attached only said that he hoped all the headmaster's missing memories were contained within Anatio. Slowly the icy grip of winter began to give way to early spring, and the relaxed state of Hermione tightened very quickly into a frazzle where she became very focused on the end-of-year exams. The others became very used to her shortened temper and tended to just go with the flow. Some of what she wanted to do to get ready for exams, the group was willing to comply with. They were, after all, good ideas, but to some of it, they just paid lip service. During the lead-up to Valentine's Day, Harry was more concerned about his gift for Daphne than he was about schoolwork. He even asked the other girls what they thought would be a good gift for her. But most times they just cryptically said, just be romantic. When he asked Neville, the boy just replied, how would I know? And when he asked his dorm mates, they just snickered and gave him unhelpful and sometimes ribald, worthless suggestions. With only a week to go, he finally decided to pull out the communications mirror Sirius had given him and taught him how to use when he stayed a couple of days at Grimmauld Place. Opening it, he whispered, Padfoot, onto the surface of the glass and waited. A few minutes later, his reflection blurred out to be replaced with his godfather's face. Hello, pup, said Sirius by way of greeting. It's nice to see you've remembered the mirrors. What can I do for you? I need some help in coming up with ideas for Valentine's Day, replied Harry, a little uncomfortable. For Daphne. Well, my godson has decided to ask his dear godfather for help in being romantic for his lady. Sirius seemed to beam. With a mock sniffle and dabbing of his eyes, he said, This is exactly the sort of thing I dreamed I would be helping you with when I agreed to the honor. With a groan, Harry said, Sirius, please, there's only a week to go and I'm at a loss. All right, pup, his godfather relented. I would suggest talking with the elves and seeing if you can arrange a romantic dinner for two somewhere within the castle. But that's for the evening. In the morning, I suggest you have a rose or roses delivered to her at either breakfast with a nice card, or maybe a single rose delivered to her pillow with a nice note by the house elves. Your father did the latter for your mother in their 6th year. All right, said Harry, calming down. He began muttering, a rose, a white rose. No, 2 rosebuds, one red and one white, intertwined and thornless, with a small card. I'll have it left on her bedside table. She'll see it when she wakes up without it being too close. An excellent choice, said Sirius. Do you know the colour and presentation has meaning? Yes, replied Harry. A red rosebud is symbolic of purity and loveliness, A white rosebud is symbolic of feminine youth, thornless symbolizes love, and two intertwined is symbolic of marriage. A good combination, said Sirius. Now, what about for the evening? I think I'm going to break school rules and have one of the Potter elves prepare a nice dinner for two. It'll be a Friday, so for tradition I think we'll have fish. Breaking the rules for something so important is worth it, said Sirius firmly. And you may as well use one of the Potter elves to deliver your twined roses in the morning. And, if you're going for fish, try a semillon. Alcohol-free, of course. It's quite sweet. And I'm sure there's some in the Potter Mansion wine racks. James, your father, told me once it was the white wine to which Potter children are first introduced. Wow, said Harry. I should have asked you about this ages ago. Then why didn't you, dear boy? Grinned his godfather. Because I sometimes forget adults know things too, replied Harry with a cheeky grin. Scamp, his godfather mock scowled. Thank you, godfather, said Harry, a little more serious. You're welcome, said Sirius, and don't forget to let me know how it goes. I will, replied Harry. Before signing off, he asked Sirius to loan his mirror to Isabel for the Friday night, as he expected Daphne might like to talk to her mum that night. Sirius was more than happy to comply. Father, okay. During the week leading up to Valentine's Day, Harry swore Tracy to secrecy and quizzed the girl on how the first-year Slytherin girls' dorms were laid out. From her, he learned that Daphne's bed was in the back left corner, that she didn't have a bedside table, but did have a shelf built into the headboard. That she left on there a hair tie to tie back her hair when showering in the mornings, as well as a few other knickknacks. And that Daphne always rose just before 7:10 a.m. on a school day, so the two of them would get to the showers first. With that information, he was ready to instruct a Potter house elf with what to do on the morning. As for Friday evening, he'd already talked to Cookie about the meal he wanted prepared and when it was to be served, and he'd talked to Petey about setting up the come-and-go room for him and being ready to serve. During the week, while in his dorm after curfew, he organized for and magically twined the thornless stems of a white rosebud and red rosebud together and tied them with a sapphire-colored ribbon. He managed to get a beautiful small card, wrote within it, and tied with the ribbon to the roses. Then placed the lot under a stasis charm until Petey collected it during the early morning of Friday morning. The only clue he gave to Daphne, he was planning something, was during one of the group's times in the library when he said, I think, after herbology on Friday, I'm going to have a really hot shower and dress really nicely. No school robes for Friday night. Turning to look directly at Daphne, he asked, Do you think you might consider dressing up on Friday night, Daphne? The girls, except for Daphne, all tittered while Neville looked a little confused. Blushing a bit, Daphne just looked at him and nodded before she finally said, I think that sounds like a good idea. Then how about I meet with you at the bottom of the secret passage from the dungeons to the 7th floor and escort you to dinner that night, he asked. Say 5:30? I'd like that, she softly replied. Neville was sitting alongside Hannah, so he carefully leaned over to her and quietly asked, What's so special about Friday? Hannah hesitated a moment before turning her head to him and lightly kissing his cheek. Then she reached up with her offhand and lightly cupped his opposite cheek before she whispered into his ear. When Hannah suddenly kissed him, he blushed bright red. But when she whispered into his ear, his eyes widened in surprise. He quickly looked at both Harry and Daphne before looking at the other three girls. He then sat up a little straighter, firmed his shoulders, and seemed to come to a decision. On the Thursday after classes, Harry slipped a note to each of the others, informing them he was taking Daphne to the come-and-go room the next night for dinner so they wouldn't be missed, and begged them to keep it to themselves. Harry had a restless night's sleep that night and was one of the first down for breakfast. He sat at the Hufflepuff table because it was between the Ravenclaw and Slytherin tables, and that day was truly about loyalty and friendship. At first he thought he wasn't hungry because he felt his stomach was a little upset with worry. But once he sat down, the mouth-watering smells of breakfast led him to build a decent plate of food. His friends, except for the two Slytherins, had joined him before he saw out of the corner of his eye someone run into the hall. Quickly looking up, he realized it was Daphne. She was holding the twinned roses in her hand, and holding it to her chest. Spotting them sitting at the Hufflepuff table, her eyes widened slightly before she ran over and pulled Harry up from his seat before saying anything. Standing up and facing her, she immediately threw her arms around his neck and forcefully snogged him right there between the Slytherin and Hufflepuff tables. That earned them quite a few catcalls, especially from the Gryffindors, who were always vocal. When Daphne pulled her head back to look into his eyes, he could see she had been crying a little. Her eyes were just a touch bloodshot and red-rimmed. "Is there something wrong?" he asked with concern. "No," she giggled, giving him another quick kiss. "Everything's perfect." While they'd been standing there content in each other's company, Tracy had walked in and joined the group at the table. "Okay, you two," she said firmly. "Enough lovey-dovey. It's time for breakfast then, classes." Harry assisted Daphne into the seat alongside him, and they broke their fasts together. And together they watched other public displays of love around the Great Hall, happy that this day the rules against students showing public displays of affection for one another were relaxed. Daphne was also quite happy to show the rest of their group, plus just about anyone else who asked, the twined roses. And how she woke that morning and reached for the tie she used to tie her hair back before taking a shower, and her hand coming away with the twined roses instead. Tracy also told the group how Pansy Parkinson was woken when Daphne screamed at finding the roses and then proceeded to stare daggers until she left with Millicent Bulstrode in tow. "I do believe Pansy was really jealous," said Tracy, "but Millicent was a surprise." "What do you mean?" asked Hannah. "While we were in the bathroom trying to take care of Daphne's eyes, Millicent was in there putting on her makeup," she replied. "She then told Daphne and me exactly what the types and style of roses, plus why they're twined together, mean." "And what do they mean?" asked Hermione. Tracy just smiled and said, "I'll tell you later. I don't want to set the waterworks off again," and smirked while pointing at Daphne. Daphne sniffled a little but was clearly very happy. When mail was delivered, all the girls, except Daphne, received a similar colored envelope and a small white rose in miniature. When they opened them, they each held in their hands a personalized card. After they each finished reading theirs, the 4 girls each grabbed Neville and gave him a bit of a snogging, something which was again greeted by hoots and catcalls, especially from the Gryffindor table. When he sat down, Neville was both blushing like mad and had the widest grin on his face Harry thought he'd ever seen. "Damn, Nev," said Harry, a little awed. "4 at once? You hound owl Jew." Instead of retaliating, Neville just sat there with a happy grin on his face, feeling quite smug about himself. It was Daphne who smacked him on the arm and told him to behave before she turned to Neville and said, "That was very nice, Neville." Cheers. At odd times throughout the day, Harry was approached by quite a few blokes to congratulate him on his gift, and to give him a little light ribbing. "Bloody hell, Potter," said one older male Hufflepuff. "Nice way to make the rest of us look like uncultured apes." A few of the more clueless, usually the youngest, wondered what all the fuss was about. After all, it was only a couple of flowers. When Neville was escorting Hermione between classes, they were about to pass a group of third-year Gryffindors when a Weasley twin said, "Look out, gents, it's that stud Longbottom." "Hold on to your girlfriends," called the other one. Neville just happily grinned as he walked past, while Hermione, proudly wearing her own miniaturized white rose pinned to her robes, huffed and said, "Honestly, such boys," and threw her nose into the air as they walked on. They were followed by peals of laughter. While they were sitting in herbology that afternoon, Daphne laid her twined roses on the bench while they were working. As Madame Sprout came by, she softly asked Daphne, "May I?" and indicated the roses. When Daphne nodded in response, the herbology professor gently picked it up and moved the pair through her fingers. She said, "It's really quite beautiful. You should think about asking Professor McGonagall if she would miniaturize and permanently transfigure it into a brooch for you before it withers and browns." "That's a wonderful idea," said Daphne, excited. "Thank you." Madame Sprout nodded and handed the pair back to Daphne before patting her on the shoulder. "I dare say you have a day or two before it becomes an issue," she said before walking away. "Longer if you like," said Harry softly. "I put a bit of a stasis charm on them." Thinking a bit, she replied, "No, I'll speak with the professor tomorrow and ask if she can do it right away. I'd hate to see them get damaged in the meantime. After class, Harry headed directly back to his dorm as Daphne and Tracy descended into the dungeons. As soon as the ladies passed out of sight, he dropped back down to the bottom of the stairs to watch them go down. He only heard a snatch of conversation between them, and that was Daphne saying, "Well, I hope he wears the iridescent green and white shirt combination the evening I first met him. That would be romantic." With a nod of his head, Harry dashed up the stairs. Iridescent green and white shirt it is, he thought. Lucky I packed it. Betainia, boyers, Heken. At 5:28, Harry was standing in front of the blank section of wall in the dungeons that hid the entrance to the passage that led directly to the 7th floor. He was dressed in his iridescent robes with the white underrobe shirt as he knew Daphne wanted. He had on his matching dragon-hide boots, wand holster ready on his wand wrist, and had done his best with the hair-tidying cantrip out of the cantrip book he'd ordered earlier in the school year. Before he left Ravenclaw Tower, he caught quite a few wolf whistles and catcalls as he made his way out into the castle proper. However, he knew he looked every inch the proper wizard in his formal attire, and was quite proud of it. At 5:35, Daphne rounded the corner. Hearing her coming, Harry had already turned to the sound of a pair of ladies' heels coming towards him. What he saw when she turned the corner took his breath away. He thanked his lucky stars. Puberty had only begun to show a hint of beginning its torment upon his body. Else he'd probably be a gibbering wreck. Daphne was wearing an iridescent blue gown with light spaghetti-style straps and a shawl of darker blue similar material. But it was the jewelry she wore which set it all off. She was wearing the necklace and earrings he'd gifted her at Christmas. Her hair was also done up in what he thought of as a bun. It made her neck look longer and showed off her earrings to good effect. And she wore only the lightest of makeup, which Harry was glad about because he didn't think makeup could improve on her natural beauty. Once she reached him, he gave her a light kiss on the cheek before he said, "You look absolutely beautiful." She blushed and looked down a little before she said, "I like hearing you say that." "Then I shall say it again," he said. "You look absolutely beautiful." She smiled at him and gave him a light punch to the arm. Making sure no one was around, he asked, "Shall we?" On her nod, he reached up and turned the wall sconce. As soon as the opening was wide enough, he led her into the passage. When they exited on the 7th floor, Harry quickly led her to the other side of the grand staircase and into the corridor with the come-and-go room. The door was already there, as he hoped it would be, and held the door open while ushering her inside. As Daphne entered, she heard soft French music playing in the background. Before her was a single two-person dining table, as if right out of an expensive restaurant. It was draped in white linen and set with silver. But the biggest shock was that it appeared the table was sitting on a large balcony looking out towards the Eiffel Tower, down Ponte-Bena, on a beautiful, clear, late spring night. Paris was dubbed the City of Lights many years earlier, and seeing it within the come-and-go room, it was clear why. Daphne stood only a few feet inside the door, where she had stopped, clearly in awe at what she saw before her. Harry was happy she was clear of the doors when he entered, closed them, and placed a door sealing charm on them. He did not want to risk anyone coming upon them this evening. Once he was satisfied, he stepped up beside his betrothed, took her hand and placed it in the crook of his elbow. It wasn't until he softly asked, "Shall we?" before she paid attention to him again. With a slight nod in his direction, Harry led the girl to one of the chairs facing each other, perpendicular to the view. He pulled it out for her, waited for her to sit, and helped her scoot it in, then walked around to his own chair and took seat. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing around them. "This is amazing," she almost whispered. Indicating the area beyond the balcony, she said, "It feels so real. I can even feel a slight breeze."
"I know, right?" asked Harry.
"I still find myself in awe of what this room can do." P.T. popped just then and said, "Lord Potter, Lady Daphne," bowing to each in turn. With a snap of his fingers, a wine bucket with a bottle of wine inside appeared right next to Harry's right hand, just off the table. "The wine you ordered, Master," he said just before popping away again.
Daphne looked at Harry in surprise.
"Harry, we're not allowed to drink wine. We're too young." "Relax, Daphne," he calmly replied. Reaching over and pulling the bottle from the bucket, he said, "This is from the Potter wine cellar. It's non-alcoholic and has been used by Potters for many years to teach Potter children about wine. I've selected a nice semillon which will go well with the light salad we'll have as entree, and with the fish for the main course." Picking up the wine cork puller that he hadn't noticed sitting next to his flatware, he uncorked the bottle and poured them each a small glass of the wine. Daphne tentatively smelled the wine and took a small sip before looking at Harry in surprise. "This is actually quite nice. A little sweet, even." Nodding after taking his own first sip, he said, "I thought it best to start with something like this. I've never had wine before and wanted to have something a little sweet for my first time." The two talked about their budding relationship, their friends, and quite a few subjects as they sipped and waited. Petey suddenly popped back in again and said, "Your first course, Master and Miss." Before each a plate of a light salad appeared, lightly coated in a sweet vinaigrette. The two happily tucked in and enjoyed it quite a lot. "That was good," said Daphne as she finished up. They talked for a little bit before Petey returned and said, "A little cheese to cleanse the palate, Master and Miss." Their salad plates disappeared to be replaced with a platter of a few slices of cheese. Tasting each different piece, Harry said, "I think I tasted a little aged cheddar and a slice of camembert in there. I don't know what the others were. One was brie and the other, I think, is commonly referred to as crackerbox," she said. Petey reappeared and disappeared the platters. He said, "Main course, Master and Miss, sole in butter and a lemon sauce with steamed vegetables lightly glazed in honey," before disappearing again. "Wow," said Harry. "That's even better than I asked for." He watched as Daphne tried a small forkful of fish and saw her look of happy surprise before he tried his own. Matching Daphne's look, he found the fish to be light and flaky, with the sauce giving it only a touch of zing. It was delicious. The vegetables were not overly cooked, retaining a slight crispness, but they were enhanced with the honey glazing. Only partway through her plate, Daphne looked at Harry and said, "I've eaten in a few upper-class restaurants, both muggle and magical, and this would have to be the best prepared meal I've ever eaten. I think I'm going to have to ask you to bring the Potter elves to Greengrass Estate, so they may show our elves how to cook this wonderfully." "Well, we're certainly not going to starve for good food at Potter Manor," said Harry. The main course happily finished. The two were talking about Neville's bold move in sending flowers to the other girls among their friends when Petey returned. "Dessert, Master and Miss. An egg custard with a caramelized topping of raw sugar served in individual pots." Their main course plates disappeared to be replaced with almost a bread and butter plate, with a round dish with vertical sides placed in the center. Within was the egg custard. "This too looks delicious," said Harry. Picking up his spoon, he carefully scooped out a small amount and tasted it. Like the rest of the meal, it was beyond delicious. When he'd finished, Harry sat back and said, "I think I've just found a dessert I like more than treacle tart." Nodding as she was finishing off the last of her own dessert, Daphne said, "Me too, I think." While they were waiting for what was next, Harry said, "I didn't realize Neville had it in him to buy 4 ladies a Valentine's card and gift, knowing they'd each receive it while in the company of the others, and not be worried he'd be hexed into oblivion and be kissed by each in turn. It's clear to me now why he's in Gryffindor." "'Twas a bold move," he said. "Well, I think it was sweet," said Daphne. "And so did Tracy and Hermione when I spoke with them in class this morning. I've no doubt Susan and Hannah feel the same." "I've heard he was strutting around quite proud of himself between classes," said Harry, "and that some of the older guys bowed to him in recognition of his act." After talking a little while longer, Petey returned with a small platter of cheese and light crackers to enjoy and clean the palate again. They were even enjoying themselves in each other's company. So much that Petey had to return for a final time to inform them curfew was only 15 minutes away. Thanking the little elf who had done so much for them that night, they headed out after one last long look at the panorama of the French skyline. Harry quickly removed the door sealing charm and then escorted Daphne all the way to the Slytherin common rooms, or, more properly, where Daphne told him it was. Before he left, he reached into his robes and offered her his mirror. He said, "This is a communications mirror. They belong to Sirius. I asked Sirius to loan its twin to your mother for tonight, so if you'd like you can give her a call back in your dorm to let her know how the night went. To activate it, just whisper Padfoot close to its surface, and it'll let your mum know you're ready to connect. Daphne looked at it in a little awe before giving Harry a kiss. She said, "Thank you." "You're, as always, very welcome," he replied. After a last good night but sweet kiss, he bid her sweet dreams and headed back to the Ravenclaw Tower, making it with a few minutes to spare.